Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Michael, hang on just a sec, pal, okay?
Apologies.
That's okay. Folks, we'll get started just momentarily. You all can have a seat just for a couple of minutes.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us for the Cherry Hill Public Schools Board of Education meeting for October 12th, 2021. Public notice of this meeting pursuant to the Open Publics Meeting Act has been given by the Board Secretary on October 6th, 2021 in the following manner. Posted notice on the school bulletin board at the Administration Building, transmitted to the Courier Post, Philadelphia Inquirer, and the Clerk of Cherry Hill Township. Please rise with me for the Pledge of Allegiance to be led by ROTC Michael Wen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I will now turn it over to Mrs. Sugars for roll call.
Mrs. Arroyo,
Here.
Mrs. Stratton. Here. Ms. Friedel,
Here.
Mrs. Matlack,
Here.
Mr. Avadia,
Here.
Mrs. Schultz,
Here.
Ms. Stern,
Here.
Mrs. Tong,
Here.
Mrs. Neri.
Here. Okay. At this time, I'd like to read off our Board of Education candidates, and if you are here, please stand when I call your name. First, we have Jen Fleischer, Nicholas Gaudio, Sally Tong, John Papica, Carolina Bevid, Alani Yares, and Benjamin Root. Again, these are your candidates for the Cherry Hill Public Schools Board of Education election. Thank you. Okay, and next we have our board recognition, and I will turn it over to Dr. Malash.
Thank you, Mrs. Neri. I'm very excited for the board recognition tonight. And as I get ready to get started, I'm going to have Mrs. Wilson, our public information officer, is going to put a slideshow started up on the screen. And Mrs. Wilson, do you want to go through? Well, I'll do a little introduction and have you go through and talk about a little bit more. So Cherry Hill School District participates and is a member in the New Jersey School Public Relations Association, which is a statewide organization and it's part of the national affiliate of school public relation associations. Mrs. Wilson, as our public information officer, represents the district within this organization. So every year, the organization holds an awards ceremony and allows school districts from across the state to participate and to submit items to be recognized. So Cherry Hill this year won more awards than any other school district in the state. 3 first place awards and a second place award. You can see them sitting here up on the table by us. So Mrs. Wilson and all of her work is also going to share what those awards were and what they were for and just talk a little bit about it. So Mrs. Wilson, first, congratulations.
Thank you very much. It was really an honor to have this work recognized this year. And I will say about this job, I do enjoy it. It's a great job. And one of the best things about it is working with Dr. Malash. When I go to him and say, I have an idea, I'm thinking about doing this generally. I think every time I've done that, he said, I like it, let's do it. You know, that sounds great. So it's a wonderful way to work and a wonderful partnership. I will start with, well now, if I can get the presentation to work. There we go. So I'll start with the first category, which was media relations, human interest. The entry was called Student Voice Inspires Mandatory African American Studies course. The category focuses on the human interest side of media relations. The entry was evaluated based on story, message, and interest level. It had to have been published in at least one news media outlet between July 1st and June 30th of 2020 into 2021. So how this came to be was that student members of the African American Culture Clubs of Cherry Hill High Schools East and West responded to the 2020 murder of George Floyd in a great example of student voice, organizing a Juneteenth march in partnership with the Cherry Hill School District, the Cherry Hill Mayor's Office, and the Cherry Hill Police Department. The event's theme, Learning Begins Now, Stop the Ignorance, called for action on the part of district administration to create a mandatory high school African American Studies class, which was the first mandated class of its kind in the state of New Jersey. Dr. Malash accepted the students' invitation to speak and march at the event. We publicized the event. We encouraged the community members to attend. After receiving extensive local coverage, the student and administration partnership to develop the mandatory African American Studies course was featured on ABC News Nightline on February 8th, 2021. This coverage garnered widespread praise from our own community, with hundreds of likes from our district Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter feeds, including 19 shares from our Facebook page and 13 from our Twitter page. In direct response to the coverage, representatives from 6 New Jersey school districts contacted our curriculum office to ask for our process for implementing the course. The coverage and subsequent conversations have immensely strengthened our narrative as a forward-thinking district devoted to student voice. And then the other entries, the next 3 categories, were part of a larger Welcome Back campaign for our hybrid learning students who chose to come back to in-person classes in our buildings beginning on January 19th, 2021. So for photography, the entry was evaluated on creative content that evokes emotion or portrays action, balance, composition, framing, and use of light. Submissions should depict success stories in the public schools, COVID-19 related issues, equity in education, social emotional learning, health and safety, or other relevant themes. They had to have been published either in a district publication, the website, social media, or news media, and had to be an original work. So this photo features our 2 high school mascots, Wesley the Lion from Cherry Hill High School West and Crimson the Cougar from Cherry Hill High School East. It was featured on the homepage of our website, as well as in our Welcome Back video and a Welcome Back poster with reminders about COVID-19 protocols. So you see here, they're doing an air hug, showing appropriate social distance while being properly masked, which covers 3 important COVID-19 protocols we're still using today. Their reflection in the glossy hallway floor demonstrates the cleanliness standards to which our students and staff returned, And their masks with a purple W for High School West and a red E for High School East represent the "we" brand that we communicate in nearly all district communications. So we're showing that we work together to keep each other healthy and safe as students return to our buildings. And then the next category was special interest publication, a poster for welcoming back hybrid learning students. This was a category that didn't really fit into other categories and was evaluated based on clarity of information, creativity, consistency, unity, and graphic design, including the use of photographs, fonts, color, and white space. So this was just an upbeat way to promote proper mask wearing, proper greetings, social distancing, reminding our students to bring their water bottles to school, as many parents had asked about water bottles and whether they would be allowed. And the poster was so popular with our building principals that we had to do another print run. And then finally, we had the video category. This category could include, but not limited to, marketing enrollment, staff and student successes, health and safety updates, including COVID-19, leadership messages, strategic plan, et cetera. These entries were judged for professional quality, including content, script, lighting, sound and music, motion, editing, and relevance to the audience. So this was developed looking at many stressful months for our families and staff coping with the pandemic, and we believed the messaging needed to be upbeat. So this delivers reminders about our COVID-19 protocols as a purposefully designed PSA. It's short, it's snappy, it's to the point, it's only 48 seconds long. The video was posted on the district website, on our YouTube channel, our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages, and in our weekly e-newsletter with thousands of views. And I'm going to show it in just a second, but I also wanted to give special thanks to Wesley and Crimson. Originally, when I planned this video, I thought I would get video of them walking in the hallways and filling their water bottles and that sort of thing. Then I was fitting them for their masks. And I realized that when the mask is on their face, Wesley and Crimson can't see. The plan changed a bit. We decided to do a series of still photos. They were very patient. There was a lot of direction about raise your left paw, raise it a little higher, move this way, that kind of thing. So at any rate, I want to thank them for their patience. And let me see if I can play the video. Will it play? Did not play. Well, it was supposed to be embedded in the presentation, and I'm not sure where it is.
That's right, Mrs. Wilson. It's still up. We can find it on the website, or do you want to try and go directly through to play it?
Yeah, do you want me to go back?
Sure. One of the things that with the awards, there were 14 judges, was made up of folks who work in the profession, in public information or public relations, not just in schools, but also in corporate America, as well as college professors. And the 14 judges were across 9 different states that were sent all of the information.
Here we go.
Very good, Mrs. Wilson. Thank you for getting that and for showing that.
Thank you. Sorry about the.
For decades, the Stone Trent.
That's okay. Nice job. We're very proud of the work that you have done. Thank you for continuing to represent the school district and for sharing that information. And a little side note, Mrs. Wilson was also the seamstress that made the masks for Wesley and Crimson, right? Little
Other
fun
duties
fact-
as assigned, Dr. Malash, that's right.
Fun fact from behind the scenes. So thank you, Mrs. Neri. I also, because we normally at this time of the board meeting, we've been doing road forward presentations, going all the way back into the spring when we were doing the return to learn presentations. We do not have an update for the board and the community this evening with the road forward. Dr. Morton, as chair of the road forward committee, he's had the district level committee has met, the grade band, the level committees, elementary, middle, and high school, and a special ed committee will be meeting soon. We will have additional updates for the board and the community on the 26th of October. And Dr. Morton, I don't know if there's anything else that you want to add?
Yeah, well, the level committees are meeting this week. The next committee meeting of the whole will be Monday. And then we'll be ready and set for updates the next board meeting.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Malash, and congratulations again, Mrs. Wilson, on this award. Were there any administrative reports this evening, Dr. Malash?
There are not this evening.
Okay, great. Okay, that brings us to correspondence. Did any of the board members have correspondence this evening? Mr. Ovadia and then Ms. Stern.
Thank you, Mrs. Neri. So just two meetings I was able to attend since last we were all together. The first was the Camden County Educational Services Commission, which I attended on behalf of the board on October 6th. What was interesting that I wanted to bring to the board is two things. One, so Camden County Educational Services Commission, they have a wide purview. They were talking about transportation as a national issue, and as the superintendent there said, it's a national issue with few solutions. A lot of schedule adjustments. I found out that some of our county school districts have revised their bell schedule. Some have even shortened days. So this is having a direct impact on instruction in New Jersey. There was some fear that the vaccination mandate could make things even worse in terms of finding drivers to fill the vacancies. But at least at that point in time, there was some vagueness because the drivers don't enter school. And therefore, I think from the point of view of the commission, there was a hope that they might be exempt. The other interesting thing, just a sort of an interesting note, Michael Kidd Gilchrist, who for people who are fans of the NBA probably know better than I, actually was born and raised in Summerdale. He had a pervasive stutter. He has created a group called Change and Impact, and basically the Ed Services Commission and Stockton University are sponsoring an event. The hope is to basically raise awareness around speech and hearing, to create clinics, and the hope of the commission is to launch those clinics and be able to bring those out to various districts, including perhaps someday our own. So that's an interesting thing. That event's going to happen soon. I'm sure we've been invited formally, but anyway, just good, interesting note there. And so that October 6th was chock full. A couple hours later, was able to attend my first building improvement discussion at Hart. And so that was the first night. And at Hart, about 50 community members came out. It was a very well-delivered presentation with a very engaged audience. I think actually Dr. Malash and Mrs. Wilson were able to join. The principal there did a great job and was co-presenting with Mrs. Sugar. So a lot of people were in the house for the first event, but it was a very engaged group, really good questions. And so that was really a pleasure to be part of. And I definitely, it was great to see the level of engagement out there. And as I told the group assembled, that was the best PTA meeting I've ever been to. And I was president of the PTA. So, good for them and good for Hart and good for us to get that ball rolling. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ovadia. Next, we have Ms. Stern.
Thank you, Mrs. Neri. So I was checking my dates because quite a few things that I've been attended. I wanted to make sure I didn't miss any. I attended the Road Forward Committee meeting on October 4th. And it was kind of our final meeting as that group. And then as Dr. Morton said, we'll be meeting again and also in breakout groups and for the levels. And basically just wrapped up some of the discussions we've been having and kind of where we were going forward on the road forward. And then I did attend the Camden County, Camden and Gloucester meetings for the New Jersey School Board Association. The topic was at masking and unmasking. That was a discussion topic. There was a lot of information shared, as there always is at these meetings, about a lot of legislative topics coming up. The digital divide, the state budget highlights, the upcoming legislation on increasing the aid, school aid by the state has increased school aid formula by $580 million, which is great, especially for Cherry Hill. We've been so underfunded. That there's been an increase in extraordinary special ed funding, additional monies put in. So that's, a relief and exciting for a lot of school districts. There's also amendments happening and work being done on, and I hope I get this right, the Chapter 44 provision, which is about the health insurance benefits that go to school employees. And now there's some changes being made that actually there's negotiation that can happen with districts and the collective bargaining units about the employee contribution. So that was something that previously was not allowed to be negotiated. And Cherry Hill has had some, this is important for Cherry Hill because we've been impacted financially by the Chapter 44 laws. And then there was a presentation, and it was generally a presentation about communication. It wasn't really specifically about boards of eds discussions regarding and community discussions about masking or unmasking in schools. And there was actually a board member from another district who expressed a lot of frustration that there wasn't more of a robust discussion about that, and talked about their board meetings being very challenged by this topic, and also about their board meetings being very disrupted by ongoing comments and even some students being demeaned in their public comments but at school board meetings in their town, so in their district. So it was really disheartening to hear, quite honestly. So there's a lot of challenges going on for boards. And usually they also talked about the upcoming conference, which many of us, I think, or maybe all of us, are going to the end of October, and also some available webinars and discussions that we can access, including one about equity and CRT, since that's also coming up in a lot of districts. So a lot of information shared. And then I attended the Stockton Elementary facilities needs discussion as well. That was on October 7th. I think I got 8th, 7th. Sorry, days are running together. And that was it was my first time being back at a Stockton PTA meeting in a long time. It was a virtual meeting. I think there are probably about 30 participants, and Mr. Reardon, the principal there, did a phenomenal job, I thought, presenting. He really had a great understanding of the facility needs in the building. Dr. Malash was there, Dr. Mahan was there. So it was a very quiet response from the audience, the attendees. There were very few comments, questions. My sense was it was a lot of information that was very perhaps new for a lot of the people attending the PTA meeting, it's elementary level. So perhaps some of the parents haven't been even in the schools, or not in a long, maybe their kids are younger in the schools. So it seemed like there was a lot of contemplation going on with the information. So just something I think we have to kind of as a board, think about, you know, in our further discussions. And then the last meeting I went to was in the zone PTA meeting this morning. And there was mention of the upcoming holiday gift card drive for families in Cherry Hill. So where community members can participate, families can participate in donating gift cards for families in the district that are identified through the school nurses as families that would benefit from them during the holiday time. Again, there were all the assistant superintendents attended the meeting today, and they all presented about their role in the district, which was nice to hear and nice to see them. There was a presentation by Garrison Architects about the facility needs, kind of a general presentation. This is to the entire zone PTA, so I think it was really helpful. And there was several questions. One of them that came up was whether or not the Eureka math textbooks have been received by the middle schools, and they have. They've all now been received there. There was some other discussion, but that was a pretty general sense of what the discussion was. So I think that captures it all, and we have a lot of meetings coming up. So looking forward to this.
Thank you, Mrs. Stern. And as with Ms. Stern and Mr. Avadia, I attended the Barton PTA meeting this week where the facility needs were presented to that community, and it was a very solid turnout. I want to say maybe 40 plus parents that came out for that meeting, and they were quite engaging, had a lot of questions. So it was a very good conversation. I attended with Dr. Mahan, and so it was a good opening to the conversation. They were very interested in how to give their feedback and what that would look like. So it was definitely a good start to the process. And that was all that I had with correspondence. Was there anyone else? Okay, that'll bring us then to our first public comment. And the first public comment will be for 3 minutes on action items only, 17 through 21, and that is items being voted on, number 17 through 21. And each individual can please state their full name and municipality when speaking. And as we have done in the past, we will take members of the audience first, and then we'll move to a caller, and we will rotate. And I'll just read this statement. Cherry Hill is a community that values education. Issues that affect our children, schools, and community bring out strong emotions in all of us. The Board of Education takes seriously its vision to work with civility. Please join the board in sending a message to our students that even the most difficult issues can be addressed while showing respect for one another. And again, when speaking, please state your full name and municipality. And I will start with the audience.
Alana Ayers, Cherry Hill, and I'm speaking to item 19.1, specifically Dr. Rick's retirement at Kilmer Elementary School. I was disheartened to learn yesterday through an email that he would be retiring. I know my children love seeing him every day, and they'll be sad to see him go. But what is more disheartening is that now my children will have a 5th principal in their very short amount of time in elementary school. Dr. Morton left in 2013. Dr. or Mrs., I wasn't sure, Tiernan came and was there for 4 years and left in 2017. Mrs. DeJesus Woodruff was there for not even a full year. She left in the middle of the year. There was no principal. There was then an interim principal for 2018-2019, the 2018-2019 school year, and Dr. Rick was hired to come in July of 2019. Now this year, there will be an interim principal based on the job description posted on the website for the rest of the year. And then maybe the interim principal will continue next year and in the future, or maybe not. That is a huge high turnover rate. And I would just hope that the board and the district would listen to focus groups and input from parents and the PTA to make sure that there is not as much of a high turnover rate in the future for the Kilmer principal and any elementary school. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Yard. Okay, and next we'll go to a caller on the line. please state your full name, municipality, and action item you are speaking to. You need to unmute your line. You're still showing as muted.
My name is Jeff Potterworth, Cherry Hill, New Jersey. I'd like to talk about 18.3 and 21.1. The 5 tennis courts that are listed for repair will now be over $532,000. Board, please explain why there's almost a 20% increase in unforeseen costs. Item 21.1, it's the Cherry Hill School District Goals Action Plan. I'm talking about one of the district goals, assess and support populations with special needs, IEP 504 ELL, that's all in parentheses. Unfortunately, special needs include student with IEPs and 504s. ELL alone is not considered a special need. Please remove ELL from the parentheses. That includes IEP and 504. It's also or state identified vulnerable population. It should be under that. Please add the. There's another line. Please add Cherry Hill Special Ed PTA as one of the organizations below the SEPAG. All right. Under resources for major activity, only survey Hanover Research is listed. Please add the Cherry Hill Special Ed PTA to this one item list. This PTA has been in existence for 20 plus years, representing the special needs, IEP, and 504 population and families in our school district. They definitely are a go-to resource for information in our community. Please list checked up as a resource under or above survey Hanover Research. Under indications of success, administer Hanover Research survey, etc. We are not even sure that the survey will not contain biases. I have concerns that it will. Board, please modify indicators of success in this area. If you can't, please table the indicators for success for this major activity. I really am concerned about, from what I've read, that survey may very well contain some biases, as I'm seeing already. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you, Dr. Potowitz. Next, we have a member from the audience.
Hi, my name is Christy Padron, and I'm from Cherry Hill. We're actually some of the members of our Kilmer PTA. We wanted to say how much we appreciate and love Dr. Rick. We were
Which action item are you speaking
Oh,
to?
19.1, sorry.
19.1, okay, thank
Yes,
you.
sorry. We were surprised and very sad that he's retiring, but we wanted to be here to wish him support and lots of luck. We did want to say as well that if there was a parent or a PTA committee to help look out for a new principal, that would be amazing, because we have a lot of interesting things planned for this year. And we would also, because there's such a high turnover, Kilmer has made great strides since Dr. Rick became principal, including earning the National School of Character. And we would like to see this momentum continue for our children and our staff. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take another member of the audience.
Hi, I'm Bonnie Yaris. I've lived in Cherry Hill for 42 years. I had children go to Kilmer. It's 19.1, as well as grandchildren at Kilmer. As a community member, I am so upset about Dr. Rick's retirement. I know he needed to, and all the best to him. But in the history of my time in Cherry Hill, there have been very few people as high as in regard as Dr. Rick and Dr. Cy Wallach. A number of years ago, since I just found out today, I couldn't do my research. The parents of Kilmer actually came to a board meeting and protested because Dr. Wallach was put in for a year and he did a better job than all the previous principals. Then we were able to get Dr. Wallach to stay on, I don't remember if it was 2 or 3 years. Since then, I don't believe till Dr. Rick that there's been anybody at that type of high quality. I think we owe it to the community to make sure we find somebody and a person who's committed to stay for a long period of time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, a member from the audience.
Hi, Rick Short, 1002 Chelton Parkway. I'm going to speak about number 21. Hello. 21.1 about the board goals. 3-year board goals. I'm a little disappointed that there is no public comment for 3-year term goals because we don't know what the 3-year term goals will be. But if it's immense in equity in every class, in every place we go, everywhere we eat, and everything we do, it's just a bad road to be down. We're going down this equity road. All it does is causes one person or people to be discriminated against. And if you don't understand that, then I'm sorry. But this is what will happen. Everything in this school is becoming equitable. People are getting tired of hearing of everything that is equitable. Equity will only lead long-term from this school to other schools. All it will do is dumb down New Jersey. Then it will dumb down the entire United States. When you put equity in everything you do, all you're going to end up with is dumbing the system. And what also hurts is that the teachers will also be affected. These wonderful teachers that when I go back to school night, I see these teachers that love to teach. And all you're doing is dumbing down the kids in Cherry Hill. It's pretty sad, but that's what's happening.
Thank you, Mr. Short. Next, we'll go to Seth Friedlander on the line, and please state your municipality and the item you're speaking to.
Seth Friedlander. I live in Cherry Hill, 21.1. I'd like to respond to this. Let me start by saying I've been a teacher for 25 years. I'm new to Cherry Hill, and I've been teaching in South Jersey in another school district for 23 years. And I'm a little aghast that I'm hearing comments that oppose equity in education. When you have students in the school, minority students, that they feel marginalized, the question I have to ask is, what part of ouch do you not understand? When you have LGBTQ plus students saying they feel marginalized, what part of ouch do you not understand? I really think we really need to break it down to that basic question. What part of ouch do you not understand? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Friedlander. Okay, and if there's no other public comment, that'll bring us to our committee of the whole agenda. And we will start with curriculum and instruction, and I will turn it over to Dr. Mahan and Mrs. Matlack.
Thank you, Mrs. Neri. Actually, the items pertain to the secondary schools. So I'm going to share.
Thank you, Dr. Morton.
Absolutely. All right, I'm very pleased to just share information relative to social studies pilot as part of curricular revisions that are taking place. So the New Jersey Student Learning Standards have had updates, and we've been examining our curriculum to ensure that we are aligned with those New Jersey student learning standards as well. So 2 resources in particular are being piloted now in the secondary schools, the National Geographic Learning /Cengage curriculum, as well as the Savaz Learning Company's curriculum. Savaz was formerly called Pearson K-12 Learning, so you may have heard of that. And there's also a supplemental resource that we're working with as well this year, the DBQ project. Just a little bit about National Geographic. So there's 12 teachers at Carusi, East and West that are taking part in this pilot. Grades 6 through 7 are focused on world history and great civilizations, ancient through early modern times. Grade 8 is US history, and it's focused on US history and the American story. Grade 9 is world history. This focuses on world history, voyages of exploration. It's the high school version, of course. And in grades 10 through 11, it's the US history high school version with a deep focus on America. The Savaz pilot, there's 11 teachers involved in that. Teachers from Beck, Rosa, East, and West. And it's broken down like this. It's grades 6 through 7. The curriculum is called My World, and it's an interactive exploration of the world atlas. Grade 8, My World's interactive American history. Grade 9, interactive world history, high school version, of course. And grades 10 and 11, US history, interactive high school version as well. So the resources that have been provided to all the pilot teachers and any ICR teachers as well are a teacher edition textbook, class set of textbooks as well, access to the online textbook and resources. Students also have access to the online textbook and the resources also. And the expectations for the pilot teachers are these. The expectation that they'll use the materials as part of regular instruction, that they'll share resources and informal feedback with colleagues at professional learning community meetings and department meetings, that they'll attend a virtual learning session with the specific textbook publisher, and that they'll attend 4 to 5 after-school meetings with other pilot teachers to provide feedback and to compare materials. And then I mentioned previously another supplemental resource, the DBQ project. So this here provides digital access to primary historical documents and document-based assignments. Teachers can differentiate their instruction by selecting specific assignments based upon the needs of students. 8th grade teachers actually are in the second year of using this platform for US history and civics. And at the high school level, all teachers have access to the online library to use with students, and that's in world history, US history, economics, civics, literature, geography as well. All right, I'll move on to play productions, if there aren't any questions about that. Question?
I guess my question is, why are we piloting 2 separate curriculums?
Yeah, so typically this is done because what we're trying to do is to identify which would be the best resource for us to use. So you have 2 things, you have one, you have another, you can compare it. And that's the purpose of those meetings taking place as well after school, where those pilot teachers have an opportunity to engage in discussion and talk about what's being learned and how well students are accessing the material.
Thank you.
And then I had one quick question, Dr. Morton, regarding the online library and access to that. Is that similar to the open access curriculum like the Eureka Math, where families can access it? It's open to all, where they can access documents and such? Or is that online library restricted just to the students and the teachers within the classroom?
Well, for students, they should have access to it continuously, whether they be at home or in school. So absolutely. So if I understand you correctly, yes, it's there is access at home where families can review and access materials also.
So they can see those. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. And just to go back, Ms. Friedel, your question. So we haven't fully implemented a curricular revision yet. So this is just sampling materials. That's what the nature of the pilot is. Excellent. All right. Theatrical play production. So High School West will be presenting Cinderella in the fall of 2021. I think we're all familiar with the story of Cinderella. So I'm not sure if it needs a description, but they'll also be, as part of their spring musical, they'll be doing SpongeBob. Now, I'm very familiar with SpongeBob from my children. My children love SpongeBob, but SpongeBob is a musical adaptation of Nickelodeon's long-running animated children's sitcom of the same name. We find ourselves undersea in the undersea city of Bikini Bottom, inhabited by happy-go-lucky and ever-optimistic yellow sponge, SpongeBob SquarePants, and his equally quirky circle of friends and neighbors. SpongeBob's pleasant existence is abruptly interrupted when it's discovered that Mount Humongous, a nearby volcano, will erupt within the next 48 hours and completely obliterate Bikini Bottom. SpongeBob, trying to prove himself and prove to himself in the world that he's not just a simple sponge, resolves to save the day when everybody else has given up hope. Should be a lot of fun. Also, Carusi Middle School will be presented in the spring of 22, Bye Bye Birdie, Youth Edition. The year is 1958, and the much adored rock and roll idol Conrad Birdie has been drafted into the US Army. His songwriter and agent Albert and Albert's secretary and longtime girlfriend Rosie hatch a plan for a farewell performance to take place on the Ed Sullivan Show, which they hope will help sell Birdie's new song, One Last Kiss, and ultimately save Alamo Records from going under. To cap off the performance, Birdie will actually give one last kiss to Kim McAfee, an avid member of the Conrad Birdie fan club from Sweet Apple, Ohio. When Albert and Rosie head to Sweet Apple to prepare for Birdie's arrival, things start to unravel. Kim's father is starstruck at the thought of being on the Ed Sullivan Show with his daughter, and Kim's new steady, Hugo, gets jealous at the thought of Kim kissing Conrad on national television. Goes on from there. It's a very modified version, but should be a lot of fun as well. And then at Rosa Middle School, they'll be doing Moana Jr. So Moana is the Disney musical, very popular from a few years ago. Should be lots of fun as well. All paperwork has been submitted, it's been completed and approved as well. Questions? All right, perfect. And then finally, students at the high school level will be taking the PSAT tomorrow. So specifically, students in grades 10 and 11 will take the PSATs, all students in grades 10 and 11, and select 12th grade students as well. So if 12th grade students have not met the graduation requirement necessary from the standardized test net graduation requirement, they'll be afforded the opportunity to take the PSAT. Students will be on an early dismissal schedule tomorrow. During the day, students in grades 9 and 12 will have select activities. So they will come to school at their regular time. Ninth graders, I believe here at West are doing field day type of activities and spirit type of activities. They're doing the same at East. And students in grade 12 are doing more senior-based activities, things that are pertinent to the senior year. In the afternoon after lunch, teachers will engage in professional learning. In particular, both schools are using a program called Go Formative, and they'll do training on that. Any questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Morton. Okay, I believe that brings us then.
Mrs. Neri, I'm sorry. I actually just wanted to jump back to the first item. Could we just
Sure.
go back real quick? Thank you. So Dr. Morton is my first year on the board, and so first time, well, not first time with new curriculum, but typically process-wise, so the social studies curriculum is being piloted. What's kind of we'll do through the year, and then do we evaluate to look at completely replacing? Is that typically what's looked at, would consider replacing, or?
So Mrs. Stern, yes, typically what we do is we go through and pilot materials for implementation to support our curriculum. So these are actually resources for Cherry Hill Public Schools, we write all of our own curriculum based on the New Jersey Student Learning Standards. Similar to what you have seen implemented with Eureka Math or other curricular materials, this is the process that we go through. Sometimes we choose a different product. We decide to pilot again. This is new and different for us because the standards are changing. The New Jersey Student Learning Standards are changing. So we have to revise the entire social studies curriculum K-12. And we need to be sure that the resources that we are using to teach the curriculum are aligned. So there is a curricular process that includes an audit of our current program, an audit of our current resources and materials, piloting of materials, and then I guess discussion and collaboration about the efficacy and efficiency of those materials to then decide if we are going to actually move forward with the large materials and resource purchase.
Thank you. So just so I understand, toward the end of the year, I guess, we'll just get like an update and kind of recommendations. Is that the intention is to have this kind of decided whether to either move forward or look for another one for within the school year? Is that, okay, great. Thank you so much for clarifying that.
Just to clarify, Mrs. Stern, we have something called the Blueprint for Student Success, which outlines the curriculum cycle and each step of the curriculum revision and curriculum management cycle. And I believe that document can be found on the district website, but I can also share it with you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Did anyone else have any other questions? Okay, thank you. That'll bring us into business and facilities, and I will turn that over to Mrs. Sugars and Mrs. Schultz.
Thank you, Mrs. Neri. For the business and facilities update, I provided you with a tentative budget calendar for the development of the 22-23 budget. I know that we just got started and we just got back into the swing of things, and I'm sure the principals love it when they receive my email that says we have to start thinking about next year as well. But we start that process in October, and this tentative budget calendar takes us through to the public hearing, which is in April. So it really is a lengthy process to get us to where we need to be at the public hearing in April. So we'll start that process next week. Also, I provided a grant writer update. We had a virtual meeting with Bruno Associates on October 7th, and we went over kind of what our priorities are, what we're looking for in terms of grants. And I know that there's already been some follow-up conversations with Dr. Morton and Dr. Mahan and Bruno Associates on some grants that they are interested in. So that was a very successful phone call, and I think we have a good start off for the school year in terms of grant seeking. Also, I did contact the Department of Community Affairs since our last board meeting. We had applied for a local recreation improvement grant. We had submitted that in May of 2021. The application was for playground updates at Johnson and Sharp. They were looking for locations that could be tied into other recreational type activities. So we chose those two schools because of their proximity to things such as tennis courts and walking trails and things of that nature. And I was told that they had such a large number of applicants that they have not gone through all of the applications yet. And once they have done that, that they will let us know if our grant application was successful or not. We had submitted a grant application for $500,000, and the total grant is $2.5 million. So we'll see if we get any money, some money, all of the money. We'll have to sit tight and wait until they complete their application review process. And then finally, tonight on the agenda is another change order for the tennis court project. This project has been delayed, unfortunately, victim of the supply chain issues that everyone is experiencing, particularly anything that has to do with fabricated metal. In this case, it was the fence posts that have delayed the project. And unfortunately, just the nature of the project, it has to be completed in warmer weather because of the paving and the curing and the painting that needs to happen. So we don't anticipate that it will be completed until the spring. The change order that is on the agenda tonight is to replace some of the concrete, and I provided the board with some pictures of what the current concrete looks like. It's kind of, we've waited a long time to do this project. We want to make sure, because it is an area that both the community and the school uses, that we do it right. The change orders that have been part of this project so far have either been unforeseen conditions. The first one was additional drainage that our engineers recommended once they had ripped up the current tennis courts. And then some additional things that we have requested, one of them being painting the light posts and now doing this additional concrete work. As we looked at the concrete, a lot of it is damaged. Some of it was damaged by the contractor and would have been replaced anyway. So we're going to go ahead and replace some additional areas. The front area of the tennis courts that runs along the tennis court, around the parking lot, and the side of the tennis courts that lead you back towards the football field. There are some fundraising bricks included in that area from when the courts were done several years ago. So we will keep those, and we'll find another location for those. So the other thing I wanted to point out that we are getting money from both our insurance company and from the township's insurance company to offset not all of the cost, but a substantial portion of the cost of fixing those tennis courts because they were damaged during a windstorm. So, so that is on the agenda tonight as well for your approval, so we can get moving on that project and finish that project up. Are there any questions?
Just a quick one. That you mentioned, oh, is it okay, Mrs. Neri? You mentioned, Mrs. Sugars, that some of the damage was done by the contractor. I'm guessing that the contractor will be covering the cost of fixing that, and we're adding, while they're there with the concrete, we're kind of adding that in. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Neri.
Thank you, Mrs. Sugars. Okay, that'll then bring us to Human Resources, and I'm not sure, Mrs. Schultz, if there's anything you can speak to this evening.
Mrs. Adrian, is there anything that we can talk about?
Just that we reviewed the upcoming vaccination order that's coming up starting next week. As of today, about 90.4% of our staff are vaccinated. And we also have a job description that's going to run through the October agenda cycle.
Any questions for board members? Mrs. Friedel?
Just to clarify, Miss Adrian, so when you say 90.4% of the staff, that's the entire staff, not just teachers or classroom assistants?
It is the entire staff, including coaches.
Great. Okay, thank you.
I don't see any further questions.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Schultz. Okay, then we'll move down to policy and legislation, and I'll turn that over to Mrs. Friedel and Dr. Malash.
And Dr. Malash, should I turn it over to Mrs. Wethington, or are you going to be addressing the
No,
discussion issues?
we're going to turn it over to Mrs. Wethington. I like her opportunity to shine.
Okay, so as you can see on the agenda, we have 5 policies to review. I will give you a summary. I know you received those in packet for your review prior to the meeting. So the bylaw that's 0155.1 is not mandatory. Strauss, as you know, Strauss Esme is responsible for creating and developing our policies for us. And they've received a lot of inquiries from districts about board members attending meetings remotely. This came up in one of our prior P&L committee meetings, Ms. Friedel, if you recall. And at the committee's request, we did discuss this with Mr. Green, who actually discouraged the board from moving in this direction. So it's here for your review. Mr. Green, again, discouraged the board from moving in this direction because there's no code that permits or prohibits it, and he saw too many areas of concern in trying to implement. Next is school employee vaccination. Ms. Adrian mentioned that. That is part of the executive order signed by the governor. Effective the 18th, we will be expecting staff to be vaccinated or to submit to COVID testing, and this policy satisfies that requirement. Policy 2425 is emergency virtual instruction. Dr. Morton has been saying many times during his Road Forward Committee meetings that they are working on the district's plan of virtual or remote learning. This policy relates to that required so that the district can document our plan. And then two other additions, open enrollment at the request of the P&L committee and strategic planning committee. Mr. Green went in and modified the language related to open enrollment at Rosa in anticipation of our conversation about boundary readjustment. And then the high school graduation policy, Dr. Morton caught an error in the policy. I'm going to go to page 1 of 10, and where it says class of 2021, you see some language has been crossed out. We neglected to include chemistry in that change. I don't know why. So we added chemistry back into that language and then added African American studies because that was voted on earlier in the school year, and then made two other minor changes. On page 8, just changed Park to NJSLA. As you know, Park no longer exists. Any questions about those changes?
I have a question, Ms. Wethington, regarding the policy bylaw on board participation remotely using the electronic device. Is that just for our review or our review and then we are to vote this at the end of the month?
It's for your discussion and review right now. It does not need to be voted on at the end of the month. You can certainly extend it and have additional conversation about it.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Ms. Stern, did you have a question, comment?
Just a lot of policies, a lot of questions. So I don't need to be the first one, but I guess Mrs. Neri, take your lead in terms of where we want to discuss things and, which.
I think we can just start in order, so we can start with the first one, the board participation using electronic device, and then we can work our way down.
So I did read that one, and I have conflicting feelings about it. I actually don't understand some of what are the concerns Mr. Green has. So perhaps, I don't know, in Mr. Green's absence, if you'd like to share, or if we want to wait till Mr. Green returns, but I don't know what those concerns are. I also, just as a side note, it says that 5 days notice needs to be given if one is not attending the meeting and would like to attend remotely, but oftentimes if illness is the reason, then illness doesn't always occur 5 days before a meeting. So I thought that was a little bit out of line with the idea, or at least for what I took from the idea. And that's just a small piece, but.
Did anyone else have any other comments or thoughts? Mr. Avadia?
Yeah, so I mean, I definitely have concerns. I'm not sure if they're the same as Mr. Green's, but there is something to this, I think. Well, two things. One, if we were unable to have a quorum in person, let's say, it would be nice to have a provision, but this isn't the way that this reads. This is more a matter of an accommodation for a board member who knows they're going to be absent for a reason that's, has justification. The issue there, I think, could be in selective enforcement, right? You get to participate remotely, you don't, and then, as a board, you let's say hear it. So it backs it up. So on the one hand, there's that, why this person, why not? What's the metric? And then how much time does this eat up? The only way I can see it being worthwhile is if we couldn't put together a quorum and we need to have these meetings. So that's one. But I do agree that if you go that direction, I think the impetus should be the board itself having to create a quorum. And in that case, the 5 days doesn't make sense with it. So it's one of those things. I mean, we've been able to field a meeting for, through many months of a pandemic. It's hard to see the necessity at this stage, although, as a backup plan, I could see it vetted. So I think it may merit further vetting, but not to, I wouldn't recommend moving forward as is.
Thank you. I would express similar sentiment. I would be concerned about the slippery slope. And then if we are talking about it with regards to having a quorum and being unable to meet the quorum, the language as it exists right now doesn't solve for that. And that would be the need I would foresee versus the attendance. Yes, thank you.
Just one thing I want to add to that is that under Robert's rules, there's actually no provision for a remote quorum. And when you look at the Open Public Meetings Act, it doesn't also really address that as well. It's more of what Minister Ibarra said, which is this policy is really typically used in districts that use it for board members who can't make the meeting, but the rest of the board is there. And for some reason, there's something important being discussed and they want to call in or listen or whatever. But from my point of view, I don't know I didn't really talk to Mr. Green about this one. And I'm not sure exactly what it says, but I have worked with boards who have policies like this. And there are some questions that come up about how we make the decision about which board members to allow to do this. Is it only if someone's sick that night and then the board has to meet that night and discuss about whether to let that person participate remotely and if that's an issue? And then some board members get upset about that, as well as some confidentiality issues about where the person can be when they're remote, who can listen in, and how do we know if they're really in a room by themselves during executive session or some sort of discussion like that. So those are the issues I've seen. I can certainly talk to Mr. Green about it as well.
Okay, thank you. That was helpful. I didn't know that regarding the Roberts Rules piece. Ms. Stratton?
Yeah, the way that I was reading the policy is that I felt like it really solves for if we, for example, have a board member that maybe is on maternity leave, but would like to participate and listen in, or some type of long-term medical issue that prevents them from perhaps being in person, but they are able to listen in. But the quorum situation, I don't think it really would apply because this person can't vote or do anything, even if they're just listening in, correct?
Thank you, Ms. Stratton. Ms. Stern?
I mean, in the time I've been attending board meetings, I've seen 2 board members, leaders, actually have significant medical reasons to be out for extended period of time. I saw a board member who, due to a job responsibility, was required to travel for several months out of the country. We have board members who do travel for work. I'm grateful I'm not one of them, but I just think that there are, and I think about like just a general sense of this topic of kind of modernizing our approach to things in general. I don't know that this specifically addresses that, but it does come to mind when I read this about virtual meetings. We were doing virtual, there were people working from home and the board members were, they were following privacy rules. And I do think there's a way to structure things so that you kind of solve for those questions. I think the larger issue is where do we want to go? It's not the first time this has come up. I mean, this came up pre-pandemic too. So those are my thoughts. I don't have a specific opinion, but just things that go through my head about it.
Just one more thing to add. If there is any question about what I just said, during the pandemic, there were some exceptions issued by the state of New Jersey to allow us to participate remotely. So those meetings were fine. But
Okay, thank you. Yeah, for me personally, I think it warrants further discussion because I don't know that it quite meets the need even written as is. And I'm just really concerned about the monitoring of it and who gets to decide who becomes the judge and jury of that. That's my concern. And the goal would be to be in person, especially if, we had always said that all along. And I know there was a lot of discussion. It took us a long time to get back to in-person board meetings from being remote and with the school in session. I'm just unsure. That's just my personal thoughts. Like, my brain dump in the moment after having read it and thinking about the need we're trying to address with it. I feel like there's more discussion. I don't know if anybody else agrees or has other thoughts on it. Oh, and it's Matlack, and then.
Thank you. I do think it needs further discussion. The community can participate remotely, and board members oftentimes, have a specific, very valid reason for not being able to be here. And I think we can put things in a policy that stipulates under what conditions and how often. I remember years ago, a board member taking a medical leave of absence. Don't know what that was. I wasn't on the board at the time. But in a case like that, that might be a good instance that the board would say, yes, that's a valid reason. But I think we can put those kind of things in the policy, what we think will work for us. I'd like to hear Mr. Green, when he comes back, what his concerns were about it, but just in response to some of the things Miriam said and some of the things that you brought up, those are some of my thoughts, just preliminarily.
Thank you. Ms. Riddell?
So again, I think a discussion is warranted. And again, I'd like to hear from Mr. Green also. But I guess my initial question is, so Strauss SMA created this policy in response to school districts across the state of New Jersey, or do they do nationwide? I'm not sure.
They're New Jersey.
Okay. So just
And they had a lot of requests from districts for some kind of guidance. It's difficult to create guidance when you have code that could go either way.
So I guess that's kind of where my question was going. So is this guidance that they drafted based on their legal interpretation of what is allowable?
Yes and no. I mean, the people working at Stress SMA are attorneys. So they take their best guess, but really that policy, since it's not a mandated policy that's governed by law, it's pretty much what they come up with. They usually reach out to, other attorneys and say, what are your thoughts on this and how can we work it? But it's really district specific. So when we reach out to them and say, do you have a policy on this? They try to tailor it to our needs and what we tell them we want, and then say, here it is. You can do with it what you will.
Can I just to clarify, so if we move forward with this, the way I understood it, right? We have 6 board members that travel for work. We put a policy in place, 6 of us leave, we go for work because we all think we can remote in. If I understand it, we couldn't vote because you're not allowed to vote if under this policy, correct? Right. So I guess that's my reservation is if we put a policy like this in place, then all of a sudden we're like not necessarily as conscious about board meeting dates because I can just call in, I can just remote in versus now where it's, I travel for work, but I'm very conscious of the dates of board meetings because I know I need to be here. But that to me, that could be a very real situation. I read this policy to be, I travel for work. I could remote in because I have to be there for work or I'm on maternity leave, not necessarily a policy of, hey, I'm going to remote into board meetings. So I just wanted to clarify, but it sounds like the way the policy is written, I understood that correctly. Okay, thank you.
The non-voting piece, is that due to anything under the Open Public Meetings Act, or that's just how this was written?
No, that's how this was written by Stress SMA. But it's, again, as we were just saying, it warrants further discussion. And if you wanted to allow maybe a single board member who wasn't there that night to have their vote count, that's up to the board. You would have that discussion and have to modify this accordingly.
But it doesn't call into challenge the validity of the vote of the meeting. That would be my concern from a
No,
legal
the-
perspective.
No, I mean, somebody might say that, but it does, in the law, it does allow for remote participation. What is that question? We don't know. Again, if the board wanted to allow it, it's a board discussion that we'd have to talk about. Probably a
Okay.
little bit further in executive session when you talk about what the legal aspects of that is.
Okay, thank you. Was there anyone else? Okay, I guess then we'll move down to were there any questions or comments on the school employee vaccination policy? Ms. Stern, did you have a question?
Yeah, so I just wanted to clarify in looking at the policy. Sorry, I just had it open. I'll open 100 tabs of policies open. Could I just understand a little more about, and understand the general requirement by the governor, the executive order? It doesn't look like it gives any directive in terms of testing, just submitting testing results. Am I, for a staff member who's not vaccinated, they're just required to submit testing results. I don't know if is that like clear enough? Is that like, it says whether antigen or antibody test.
Just real quick, the executive order says testing results if you're not vaccinated, but the specific method of testing is actually up to the superintendent and the staff about what they want to accept. So when he makes the decision, the state of New Jersey issued some guidance to DOE and everything, and then we make the choice about what we want to accept, and that's up to the superintendent.
Okay, so that does not require board input, the process or the cost or the location or any of that. That's not, the board doesn't weigh in on that.
Were there any other questions on the school employee vaccination policy? Okay, then we'll move down to emergency virtual remote instruction. Did anyone have any questions or comments on that policy? Ms. Friedel?
I don't know if it's about the policy, but more, there's a plan that's due to the Department of Ed, correct?
Yes, on the 29th of October.
So that will be presented. Does that need board approval? Does that get presented to us at the next meeting as to what the plan is?
It'll be presented to the board on the 26th
Yeah.
at our next meeting. Dr. Morton and the Road Forward Committee and then the level committees, that's what they're focusing on right now as they move forward. He'll have everybody together, get the input and the feedback. They'll develop what that plan will be. We'll ask the board to act on it on the 26th. And then Dr. Morton and team will submit it to the state.
Do the policy and the plan need to align in some way? Is there a relationship between the two?
So the policy lays out the guidelines and with which we have to adhere. It doesn't go into the specifics about what it'll actually look like with schedule and all that kind of stuff. That's what will actually be in the plan that we'll ask the board to act on. Once it gets approved on the 26th, on the 27th, we will post it on the website. It'll go along. It actually fits as part of the Road Forward, the Continuity of Learning Plan. There's a placeholder that's in that document now, that goes through with the addendum that talks about remote learning, TBD by October 29th. So it'll be in there, but the policy just doesn't go through the intricacies and specifics about what it would actually look like. Just lays out what it is that we must provide and gives us the opportunity and the permission to do it.
Okay, thank you. Did anyone else have any other questions? Ms. Stratton?
Just for, with this policy, it says it's specific to just a health closing. So just for general knowledge, like it wouldn't count for if there's a state of emergency due to I don't know, a tornado or something like that, that closes us down for 3 days or 4 days or a week or whatever, or any type of those issues. This is specifically just speaking to a health-related closing.
So it actually goes through, Ms. Stratton, on the second page where it says in the event of the closure of a school or the schools of the district due to a declared state of emergency, declared public health emergency, or directed by the appropriate health agency or officer to institute a public health related closure for a period longer than 3 consecutive days. So yes, and what their intention is deals with something like the pandemic.
Ms. Stern?
It's pretty general, which I think is probably good. Gives us a lot of flexibility, which we need at a time like this. But do we also have, is it restraining that it's so general in terms of if there were to be sudden changes, exchanges in executive orders, for instance? Yeah, I mean, just executive orders in general, if those big changes, then we then have to have more discussion. I guess, how does that work with this?
Changes you mean in terms of us being directed to close schools?
Yes, but it's not just about closing schools. It's about airflow and hygiene and masks. And there's a lot of other appendices here that are. So I just want to make sure that, you know, it's a pretty extensive document, but it's, again, I think it's important that it gives a lot of flexibility, which we need. But, you know, there are executive orders about a lot of these things. So just contact tracing, you know, all of that.
Just want to say, if there was a new executive order that changed something, we would have to follow the order no matter what, because that would be the law, or if the law came out. So then the policy at that portion of it, we wouldn't be able to follow. We'd have to follow whatever the order says. So then we would pivot and change the policy in that time, but we'd still be following it, whatever the law is.
Thank you.
Ms. Stern, I just want to clarify, are you looking at 1648.14 when you're talking about the appendices?
Am I on the wrong one? And 1648.11, is that the wrong one?
No, I just don't see any appendices in 1.1. Okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay. It's on the, I opened it up from the agenda directly.
Yeah, and I think we're actually going through 2425, emergency virtual or remote instruction.
Yeah.
program.
Correct.
So I'm on the wrong policy.
That was the one before, the employee vaccination.
I apologize. My mistake.
That's okay. Did it clarify your question on that policy?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Were there any other questions on the remote instruction? Okay, then I'll move down to the open enrollment. And I'm sure there's probably a lot of questions and discussion here. And I'll start, Dr. Malash. I have one question regarding the open enrollment change in the language that Mr. Green is proposing. What I don't know that we touched upon is what happens with the IB piece.
So the determination about the MYP program, the middle years program, which is part of IB, the International Baccalaureate, will be made once the determination is made about what's going to happen with reorganization with the schools. We have the committees right now. There's the administrative group that's been charged with meeting to talk about you know, the determination about where kids go to school, looking at
Okay.
the elementary levels right now, or I'm sorry, looking at the middle levels now, and then ultimately we'll look at the elementary level as well. So once that determination is made, then a determination will be made about the MYP program.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure I didn't miss that piece. That was the only question I had. Because I know we've discussed this in 2 different committees, so I didn't know if there were additional questions from the board. Ms. Bardell?
So I think we addressed this maybe in P&L previously, but let me just raise it. So with the proposal that I guess this year, this upcoming school year, 22-23 would be the last year of the ROSA lottery.
So the language that's in the draft policy has the last Rosa selection process taking place in the winter and spring of 2022, which would be this current academic year for the placement of students for September of 2022-23 academic year. It would extinguish after this year. So during the 2022-23 school year, there would not be a selection process, and the determination about where children would attend middle school would have been made, that recommendation to the board, prepared for about what that would look like. So the language that's in there has the selection process extinguishing after this year.
And at what point would it be the recommendation of the administration to talk about the students who were in ROSA? So those sixth graders that go in for 22, 23, what would happen to them? The seventh graders that are there currently and so forth, that would be part of the recommendation? Or is that part of the conversation that we're having as board members?
So right now, that's part of the discussion that's going on in the committee about what's the configuration of the 3 middle schools. We know that we still need 3 middle schools in Cherry Hill. What the team with the charge of the board is working on is what does that look like? How do we make the determination about how do we decide where children will attend, which of those 3? So that will come in recommendation, from that committee to the board. Mrs. Wethington, December-ish?
Yes, December.
So in December, we'll have a presentation to the board, information will be set out, with the public discussion about what that will look like and what they're recommending. The board ultimately will make a determination about what will take place, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, and then I guess the committee, we had a town hall. It seems like it was a long time ago, but it probably wasn't that long ago. And that was part of the community conversation. So that committee is taking that data as well as other points in their conversations.
Yes, yeah, they're taking a full comprehensive look, inclusive of the study that Dr. Grip did, the demographic study that was presented to the board in February of 2020, the town hall discussions that have taken place, and then going through looking at demographic information and enrollment trends within the school district.
Thank you. And thank you, Mrs. Wethington. I think you're leading that committee, so.
No problem.
I guess I would have one follow-up question. The way it's written now, if we move forward with the lottery being this academic year is the last one, would we not then intend to let those students flow through their academic career in middle school at Rosa, since we chose to continue the lottery? Like, we wouldn't then move them?
So and not to be obtuse in the discussion, but I think that's a discussion that the committee is having about what's the configuration of the schools. Will they all be 6th, 7th, and 8th grade schools? Will there be one that's 6th grade, one that's 7th grade, one that's 8th grade? Will there be 2 that are 6th and 7th and one that's 8th? I think that's what the committee is working on right now. That was the
Okay.
charge of what the board presented to them. If there are different parameters that the board wants to outline for the committee within which to work, then certainly those can be presented to the committee. But right now it was to, for the group that's meeting, is to take a look at what are we doing with the kids that are in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade? How are they organized? What's the configuration look like?
Okay, I'm just trying to be aware and cognizant of some of the feedback that did come through the community about just what that would look like and just being sure of managing that transition. I think was probably the biggest feedback that we had heard.
Right. Definitely part of what the discussion is that's
Okay.
going on with that group. Mrs. Wethington, I don't know if you want to talk more about that.
So the group is looking, Valsadwin, you all know Valsadwin, has been running numbers for us to look at different configurations. We have probably 5 or 6 options that we're going through that we'll present to the board as a whole in December. So I think, as Dr. Malaj said, if there are parameters that the board wants us to focus on, we sort of need to know that, because we're in the middle of the work and it really is going to shift what we're doing. So if the board value is we want kids who are in Rosa to stay there until 8th grade, then we need to know that. That's going to be important information.
Ms. Matlack, sorry.
Thank you. If I recall, Mrs. Neri, I believe in strategic planning, when we discussed this and Mrs. Worthington and some of the committee presented to us, or well, we're at least there because they hadn't presented anything, that we charge them with looking at all the options, whatever, and we also, I believe somebody said, think outside the box, because we wanted to thoroughly look at what all the options were and what we could do going forward. So that's my recollection of what we charged the committee with. So I was pleased to hear that there are some options that I hadn't considered that the committee is looking at. So thank you for that. But those are just my recollections.
Thank you. Mr. Avadia?
Yeah, I recall it similar to Mrs. Matlack. So the discussion we had in strategic planning before we recognized that that really P&L, would end up being a joint venture is we talked about the level of work that needs to go into this particular, I don't want to minimize it by saying exercise, but into this basically major project. And the idea was there had to be some, a major commitment from the board that essentially, we were going to make some major changes, but that we should look at all the options. Now that said, and going back to the town hall that was a long time ago, but not so long ago, I think the major community concern is about kids and their adjustment, right? So no one will want to go, in my mind, to a Rosa lottery for next year if there's no, let's say, guarantee going forward. So there's going to be a time of, I think, shift. Even in a well, the feeling from administration at our strategic planning meeting was we have to do middle and elementary school together. It doesn't make sense to start at middle school, which was our initial thought that it might. So I think, the December recommendations are going to be critical to thinking about how does it work in 2 periods of time. One, for the long term of Cherry Hill students so that we can have, good equity across schools so that we can have good programming. So there's a certain right sizing of the schools and the programs and what we're delivering for the students. But the second thing is to really pay specific attention to not the long term, but the short term, right? What happens to the actual kids that are going to, Sharp or Kingston or whatever it is, or who are going to back Rosa, especially Rosa, what does it mean in this time of transition? So I think, and the other thing about the committee is it will evolve, as I understand it, and Mrs. Wellington will have to correct me if I'm wrong, but it will evolve to have parents and board members and bigger groups at the table once, the administration is doing a very, very big job in terms of setting the table. So we want to make sure we're talking about the right things, but there will be a lot more people to involve. And that has the benefit of really getting us to the grassroots of the people who will actually affect both in that short term and long term. So I think the commitment on the board to really sort of like get this done in a great way, but not take options off the table, that's important. But at the same time, to reassure that it's not like we don't understand that for the kids involved in this short term, that that they have to be taken into large consideration. And to minimize any sort of trauma that would be in this transition. So just a couple thoughts.
Thank you, Mr. Ovadia. Yeah, I am relieved to hear that recommendation would come in December ahead of the spring. That was more what I was thinking. If we, moving forward with this and then understanding what it will look like for the spring. And to Ms. Matlack's point, the options I hadn't even thought of. So it's a very interesting approach. I'm really excited to hear what that could look like. So no, I think this is a great direction and a good progression of what this will look like. Is there anybody else who had thoughts, comments, questions? Okay, then I'll move down to high school graduation policy. Were there any questions or thoughts on that one? Okay, then I think that ends policy and legislation, and then I'll move to strategic planning with Dr. Malash, Mrs. Sugars, and Mr. Ovadia.
Thank you, Mrs. Neri. In your update, I sent home a lot of information so that you could review it. There had been some questions as we are diving into our improvement program information about the ad hoc committee that had been formed after the last bond referendum had gone down. And some I think the board was looking for some assurances that we were including their recommendations in our thought process. So I thought it would be a good idea to provide you with the original ad hoc committee report from May of 2019. From that committee report, we actually developed an action plan. So I provided that to you as well. Some of our timelines aren't what we had originally thought because of the pandemic, but we're still working on most of the items that are listed in that action plan, and it was developed directly from the ad hoc committee report. Also, in addition, as a result of the ad hoc committee, we formed two separate committees. One was the security committee and the other was the alternative funding committee. Those two committees wrapped up their recommendations just as we started to close down last year. And so I included those recommendations as well so you could see them. Also, I provided you with the email, the final email that had been sent to the ad hoc committee that was sent just prior to the pandemic, February 26th of 2020. Kind of so you could see kind of where we had left it with the ad hoc committee. We are definitely due to provide them with another update, and I'll be getting that out to them either this week or next week as we are kicking off our improvement plan presentation so that they can take advantage of those if they would like to. So basically just information for the board that you could review and take a look at. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. And I don't know if Dr. Malash, you have anything else that you wanted to add?
I do not, Mrs. Sugars. I think that was inclusive.
Were there any questions from the board on the strategic planning items? I know that was something that came up previously. I believe it was Mr. and they asked for an update. Mr. Vadia?
Yeah, thank you, Mrs. Neri. No, so I think Mrs. Sugars has done a phenomenal job of doing a couple things. Well, one is to really, and so this is one of these questions that comes up in these school by school meetings is, there was a lot of work right after the bond, what's happened to it. And I think it is really important just to underscore what Ms. Sugars is saying is that the ad hoc committee recommendations, they populated a lot of the work and our calendar of topics for this year's strategic planning, knowing how much was going on. I think the other important thing is it's not just the ad hoc committee recommendations, but the people. And so we're going to, it sounds like Mr. Sugar is going to circle back with them and perhaps there'd be an opportunity for a meeting where, of course, we're also rolling out things that are available to the public, town hall, some of the meetings that we're even doing at the school level. So those are good. I think one of the things, if you really look at that ad hoc implementation strategy and timeline document, is that there is a certain amount of compression that we should just be really aware of, right? Phase 2 and 3 are totally in progress, even so as part of phase 1. We're talking about sending our recommendations off to the state by the end of January of 22. So really only several months away. There's a lot of meetings between now and then. But I also wanted to share that one of the things I was thinking about, just thinking about committee of the whole for tonight is, I think that we should get board input and, as I said, there aren't that many meetings left to do it. But what is our narrative, right? The 2018 bond, let's say going down or however we want to couch that, that's got its own narrative. But what's our narrative of the current work, the current process? I think having a shared board understanding of what that is, and especially as we go out and diffuse this information to many meetings, that's going to be critically important. What do the 9 members of the board, what do our administrative team that carry a lot of this work, what's at the top line? How would we describe this in the elevator if, we had 45 seconds to a minute and 15. I think the other question, given the compression especially, is, I think we've promised 2 town halls and we should certainly schedule them, but what are the other people and entities and organizations in town that we should really be addressing now? If that's houses of worship or if that's governmental pieces, or if that's, key leaders that know that this is going to be necessary work for the future of our whole township, right? It's not just us as a group or as a subset of this community, but the whole community that really has to be involved. I think a third thing to consider is, what are our key performance indicators? What's good enough, right? If we've engaged 10,000 people, or is it 100,000 thought exchange comments, or what are the metrics where we can say as a board that we've done this successfully? And the fourth thing, I think we should, because we have so many meetings, and I think we've done 3 meetings at the school level last week. I know some are this week. Thankfully, I'm not at one this week, but I will be at 2 next week. But anyway, as we get more data and more engagement, how are we, in the business of education, how are we learning as a board in terms of what's out there and what's going forward? So just a couple thoughts, and I didn't want to totally miss the opportunity tonight to just say, if people have thoughts about this, I think it would be very helpful to Dr. Malash, Mr. Sugars, to myself, and just to our work as a board. I mean, if I've learned anything from 2018, it's that, the board's got to carry our share of this work, this load, and this narrative. And so, I just think it's really important. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Avadia. Ms. Stern?
Thank you. So I think, Mr. Avadia, you touched on a lot of items that, I think are very relevant to this immediate time we're in. And when I look at this ad hoc committee recommendations, so much of them are about community engagement and then like communication. And, I think to a few of the points you made, having now attended both elementary level meeting and also then seeing the presentation today at Zone PTA. My orientation is always, we're doing good things. How do we do them better? So, I would really also appreciate, thoughts and a discussion about how do we really, what's our clear message, and how do we make sure that that's what's really getting out there? Because I think that, my sense is there's like a lot of people saying, oh, bond meeting, well, these are not bond meetings. These are facility improvement meetings. It's a very different thing, with the idea that we will figure out from the community's input what the bond needs to be based on the community's input. And I don't know that that message is out there.
I think, Ms. Stern, at the Barton meeting, I couldn't have made it more clear to that community. The bond is not put together. There is no bond yet. We would like to move forward with the bond, but here are the needs of each of the buildings based on feedback from the principals and Garrison's assessment and doing that thorough evaluation of each building, which was an output of the 2018 bond. Is they went to all 19 schools, thoroughly reviewed, provided their feedback, and then each of the principals now have that information to share with their school communities. I think the one thing that I heard, at least from the Barton community, was, the thought exchange piece and being able to give their feedback and getting that, for lack of a better term, that survey out there so they can at least give some type of information. I think they were absorbing, and I'm not sure, Dr. Mahan, if you had the same perception that night, but I think they were taking a lot in, had a lot of questions, and I think that thought exchange will help provide that feedback, and you can start to see the patterns from there to help build what the bond is based on that, and then the planned town halls and that community feedback.
So just based on what you were saying, I think maybe how do we get a really consistent experience at each of these meetings? We're a few in at this point. I think, Ben, we were talking a few weeks ago and you said something like, we really, really, really want to hear from you, or so, like, we had like some, like, what's like a catch, like, what's the catchphrase? We have hooray for full day. Like, the message is very clear. We're going in person, full day. We're very excited. Like it was a I thought it was a great message. What's our great message that makes it really clear that this is like the language I use is the community is shaping this bond. That's how I conceptualize this, but that's not a catchy way to say it. Like, I think we really want to hear from you. I like that, Mr. Ovadia. I don't know. I
Mr.
just
Garrison would be great at this moment. right now.
yeah, and it's not as far beyond my wheelhouse, trust me. So I don't have a certain, but I just like a singular, consistent message is something that's been crossing my mind that I think would be helpful. I agree, the thought exchange. I also think like, you know, if people don't attend these meetings or they're not recorded, then where do they find the thought exchange? How do they know? And I know the building principals are going to be sending them out, but like, what's the duration that they're available to give input on? How long do they open for? You know, I think there's a lot of pieces.
Do we have that information, Dr. Malash? Have he vetted that out as far as the when and those pieces of it?
So the elementary ones were all directly sent out by the building principals. They're being sent out after the presentations are done. The presentations are being posted on the district and the school websites the day of the presentations. And there's actually two that get posted. The one that's delivered and then one that actually contains additional detail that outlines what those needs are. The time frame, Mrs. Wilson, for the thought exchanges? October 29th. Yeah, so October 29th, so about 3 weeks, right? With how long they've been open. We did not embed the thought exchanges into the presentations, just because they will be up there, will be static on the websites longer than the thought exchange will actually open. And we're doing the thought exchanges by school so that we can take a look at, you know, this is what the Barton community said, this is what the Stockton community said, and Bret Hart, and, you know, as we go through, we'll do the same thing at the secondary levels with the middle schools and the high schools. And we'll expect even a wider range of folks that will participate in those, you know, based on the people that attend. You know, I do think, you know, and Mrs. Stern, you bring it up, I do think that the messaging, at least that I've heard, you know, in the meetings that I've attended, and I heard Mr. Ovadia speak at Bret Hart's, and I heard you the evening of Stockton's, about telling the people that are there that you're looking for input and you're looking for perspective. I think that absolutely has been a consistent message that comes from the board. I know, you know, Ms. Neri talked about it. She and I have discussed it some. Dr. Mahan talked about it from being at the meeting that night, you know, over at Barton. I think that's incredibly important messaging. There's a tremendous amount of information that's available on the district website, you know, about background and about what's been done. You know, the projects, the needs of the district are legendary in some ways. You know, and I think talking about where those are is incredibly important. The age of the infrastructure and the systems within the infrastructure in our schools is very straightforward. You know, it is what it is. Those projects that need to be done need to be done. You know, discussing about what does that look like for the community? What does that feel like? You know, how do we get it? You know, so there's an engagement, involvement, and support, I think is continuing to be consistent in the messaging that's there. You know, and when Mrs. Sugars shared out the information from the ad hoc committee, you know, there was a lot of very good feedback that folks provided, you know, after the bond went down in December of 2018 about why they thought that people weren't engaged, what people did not agree with, and what that meant. You know, and that has gone into the work that's gone on during the course of the last 2 3/4 years to get us where we are. If we go out to vote next fall, which is currently the intention, you know, which will be the fall of 2022, it'll be more than 23 years after the last bond referendum, which is incredibly significant. You know, one of the phrases that, you know, Mr. Garrison talks about frequently when he speaks, and he mentioned it this morning with his own PTA, is when you're talking about why to incur that debt within a community, is to take advantage of the 40% share that the state is going to pay for it. You know, as a community, Cherry Hill has not done itself any favors over the course of the last 18 years by not going out for a referendum again. You know, and if you look at the early 2000s, the middle 2000s, and now we're in 2020s, you know, there's a lot of money that was left on the table, you know, at least in terms of the borrowing power that we had to continue to do projects. I wish I could go back to the late 1990s and have them go out and do more work at that time. We can't do that, right? We are where we are. We can't, on wishes and hopes and dreams of what was. We have to be realistic and faced with where we are. And again, I think the board members' presence, the board members' involvement, the board members' statements in those meetings are so critical. And being consistent with that. It's straightforward. You couldn't be any more honest than you've been in the meetings, any of you, as you've gotten up and spoken. And that needs to continue to be there.
Mr.
Just super quick. I think the message, the work needs to be done was a message of the last bond. And I think we want to look at, and again, completely not my wheelhouse. I am not the one that comes up with the slogans in the house, but something along the lines perhaps of shifting it to say, and make it more active and more ownership of the community. What work do you want to be done? What work do you need to, just that flavor rather than the work needs to be, we know the work, many of us see it. And the 35 people at the PTA meeting, which was wonderful. That's, but that's a small portion of the parents in the meeting that I was at. And I think like if they didn't hear my spiel or, your piece or, Mr. Reardon's piece, then, I think we just kind of like a very simple, singular message about like, this is the community's bond, community's shaping it. And yes, I do think we are trying to get that message out. And I think that, we've been putting it out there, but straightforward messaging, simple, clear, even though it's not a simple topic, but what we're looking for, I think is what we want to convey.
Ms. Friedel?
So we have a pretty robust plan to meet with all of the schools, which have already started and will continue. I know this week, I think I have 2 that I'm attending. But my question is, the school community is a portion of our community. What is our plan for our young families who don't have children in the schools, for our senior citizen community who no longer has children in the schools, or perhaps people who never had children in the schools, but they live here and they vote here? How are we reaching that part of the community whose voice needs to be heard also?
So we have all the school-based meetings are lined up. We have 2 large-scale town hall meetings that are scheduled, one late in November and one the second week in December, I believe, Mrs. Wilson. And we'll start to publicize when those are, where we'll have both an in-person and probably in a facility like this, the in-person option, as well as a Zoom option for people to have the opportunity to be online and to participate and to see what's taking place. Again, we will go out and speak to any group that's available. We will send information directly out, to the community so that people are aware of what's taking place. Some of that needs to, there are some decisions that need to be made by the board prior to a lot of that information being sent out about where we are going and what that means. And that will work during the course of, we are where we are between now and the end of December. Again, one of the critiques that came out of the ad hoc committee, honestly, was that we did too many meetings, that we did too many community meetings and spoke to too many small groups. So we're taking that into consideration. So we have the large scale town halls that are set up for late November, early December. And then we'll look at where we are after the first of the year as the process accelerates.
And then just one other question. So we also have in our high schools a population of young people who may be voting for the first or second time. Are we extending the invitation? Like, are they aware that when we meet with Cherry Hill West and Cherry Hill East and I guess the alternative school, that includes not just the parents, but also the young adults who could attend as well?
It does, and we'll share that information directly, with Ms. Giordano, the alternative program, with Dr. Perry and with Dr. Damon. I also begin, again, Ms. Wilson, the next couple of weeks, the town hall meetings with the students. So I'll start traveling out into the secondary schools, having those discussions. That's a topic that I have on my agenda when I meet with the students at the 3 high school programs. to talk with them about. And then we will look to engage the student board reps, who often support, are involved in support of what those meetings look like, the structure for the topics and all that go through, and then how we can engage the student government. It is something that we have students who are and have been very active and very engaged in what's going on in their school community and our community overall. So we'll continue to work with that. The high schools continue to work with voter registration and doing that piece. And then the engagement certainly of the alumni and what that looks like going through as well.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Sorry?
Just a quick follow-up to Mrs. Friedel and Mr. Avadia, their comments regarding the community groups. Our township has a very active senior department, and there's a big push actually to kind of for senior citizens to choose to stay in Cherry Hill. But of course, that group also has questions about tax implications when they know that they don't necessarily have children in the schools unless they have grandkids in the schools or they have other children in their household. Perhaps, I'm thinking about, earlier rather than later, working with that group to schedule a meeting. I know there's, over time, I've heard from folks from that population, that community, part of our community, and I think they do want a voice in, this is the future of our town, depends on having attracting people to live here and stay here. So I think there's a sense of that. So that's another, I think stakeholder groups, I would totally support that and happy. I also think I'd be happy to be involved in those meetings as well. So.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Avadia?
Yeah, just two things. Parting thoughts on strategic planning. I think one of the things that we've discussed as a committee is to get like a top 10, questions asked. And if we did that, the first 5 questions I would have written out at the ready for every board member, every ambassador, every person who wants to try to convince anybody else down the road is, how long will the work take? For me, that comes up all the time, and I think it's a massive question with massive implications. Why not new schools? We have data as to why they're not going to be new unless we can raise a lot more money. What the state funding percentage and why it matters, I think in 2 sentences. I think people conceptually understand it, but it's a nuanced argument, and I don't know that it needs to be. The last past bond stats, if we go back to 99 and the work that was completed by 2005, it's been a long time, and I think it's critically important to the narrative. Fair funding, how that relates to this. I think people know about fair funding. I don't know always that the translation into what we're talking about is always evident. And areas of focus for building improvements, right? At the end of the day, what changes that improves the experience of our students, our staff, our administrators in the buildings. So I think that would be, getting that top 10 would be good. And I think, I guess for me, so in my comments at heart, it's interesting is that I guess what is for me the most difficult as a person on the board a lot of people want to kind of jump the gun on the bond, right? Like just be like, well, I'm not going to vote for this bond and here's why. And what I tried to relay, probably not that eloquently at heart, is it's not really the time for that. Like there's a time where you can vote yes and you can vote no, and you should do what you think is right. But I think at this point, the question is, how do we make what comes out of all this deliberation, these years of work, into something that you would want to vote for? And if it's not something you're seeing, to be loud about it now. This bond is not built. We need, we don't have polling data at something of this level, right? With the governor race or the presidential race, you have polling data. There's no point surprising us in 4 months about what we should have done better. Tell us now, and at least it can get baked into a plan. And for 2 years, people have told me this next bond is going to fail. So it's nothing new for people to try to run down this bond, but it doesn't exist. Certainly didn't 2 years ago when people told me that the thing had no chance. So it's time to think about. I think there's a time to think about the people who should benefit from this are our most immediate stakeholders that spend a good chunk of their lives in our buildings. It's not about, it's not a glory moment. It's the right thing to do for our community. And I think for me anyway, the moment is to get this as good as it can be before we send it off to the state and we have to start educating what we've done instead of what it could be, what it is. And so I hope that people take the moment, not to be a naysayer, there will be plenty of time for that, but how could we make this the best thing out of the gate? And to me, I think that's just what needs to be clear. There's a lot of methodologies to do that. You can email the board. We have public email addresses. You can attend town hall or both of them, or come to some meetings. You can, there are two opportunities, well, at least one opportunity for public comment without an agenda item. So, it's just not the time to start campaigns against this. There's time for that, but how can we make it better and best so that we can go out with something that'll be successful so the kids benefit and so our staff. These people live here essentially. They spend most of their waking hours in these buildings. Let's make them better. So just don't want to lose sight of that basic piece as well.
Thank you, Mr. Ovadia. Okay, if there are no other questions or comments, I'll move us on to our action agenda. This should be short and sweet this evening. The superintendent recommends, and I move the following. Item 16.1, action consent to approve items 17 through 21. Do I have a second? Ms. Schultz, are there any questions? Okay, seeing none, Mrs. Sugars.
Okay, board members, I have opened up the online voting. You can cast your votes for items 17 to 21. If there are any abstentions, you can let me know that now.
Mrs. Sugars, I need to abstain to Henry Schein on the bill list, please.
Okay, and other than the abstention noted, we have a unanimous yes vote on items 17 through 21.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Sugars. I'll now hand it over to Dr. Malash.
Thank you, Mrs. Neri. Some of the parents from Kilmer pointed out one of the items that the board just approved, which was in 19.1, termination of employment certificated, and that's the retirement of Dr. Kirk Rickensrud, who is currently the principal at Kilmer Elementary School. Dr. Rickensrud will retire effective January 1st of 2022. And I just want to highlight, some of the work that Kirk has done in this district. Kirk joined the district in the winter of 2003, right around March, early in March, I believe. I had the good fortune to work directly with Kirk for a couple of years during my time as principal at Carusi when he was an assistant principal there. He was principal at Carusi, he was principal at Thomas Paine Elementary School, and his most recent position has been as the principal at Kilmer Elementary School. And with a larger than life personality and a infectious laugh and smile that both truly fill a room, Kirk has made a tremendous impact on staff members and students and families throughout Cherry Hill. He has been one of our leaders, often behind the scenes in character education. He was one of the driving forces that helped our schools, all 19 of them, become national schools of character, and certainly played an influential role in us becoming a national district of character. He truly is a gentleman and a scholar, one who loves to talk about the books that he is reading and about his children and his wife and his experiences here in the community. So he will certainly be missed. I am sure that this will not be the last that we'll hear of Dr. Rickensrud, nor will it be the last that we'll feel his influence in the Cherry Hill School District. So congratulations to Kirk and to his family, and he will certainly be missed.
Thank you, Dr. Malash. Okay, that'll bring us now to new business. Were there any items of new business from the board? Okay, I'll move on to old business. Were there any items under old business for discussion? Mr. Ovadia?
Yeah, so just something that came through P and L, just a question about, so earlier in the agenda was 85.50 with the unpaid meal charges. But I guess in P and L, we had discussed, so part of that, well, the end of the first page talks, refers back to care of school property. Now, the question I have, I guess, for P and L is, do we have to address care of school property? And I ask that because in the third, the district shall not, or no, in the first, the district shall not, it seems to, I'm just wondering if there's an inconsistency, is that it's like, all right, we're not going to stigmatize a student on the meal side of the house, but then if we go back to care of school property, it's like, well, but we can take away some privileges essentially. So I don't know if our amendments to 8550 are enough, or if our P&L plan is still to revisit care of school property, which we've talked about in committee. And I don't know. If there's more work to be done, it's fine, but, and I have no problem with 8550. I'm just wondering the 5513 care of school property tie-in. And if that's something we'll look at, or if we've obviated that by the 8551.
Dr. To address Mr. Avadi's question.
We can certainly list it for discussion again, Mr. Avadi. If there are questions and perceptively about what people think the impact is with the language that's in the policy, we can revisit again in November. It's one of the freedoms that the board certainly has, is to pull that policy back through and take a look at it. The discussion, Mrs. Wethington, began over the summer. We can certainly put it back on.
Mr. Vadia, would you like that on for November?
Well, I sort of yield to Ms. Friedel on the P&L side. Well, let's put it this way. I think if what I'm understanding about it, which is that we would look again at care of school property and revisit that separately with a new 8550, then, I mean, I would be in favor of it, but I guess I sort of yield.
Mr. Vadia, can you just clarify? So care of school property is the policy that we discussed in P&L. The committee was concerned about students not having access to activities. So do you also want to add on 8550?
No, 8550 I think is okay, but 8550 ties into care of school property directly.
It does. It references care of school property. Ms. Friedel.
So I think where we landed is that the P&L committee would like to have a conversation with the entire board on a discussion on this care of school property policy. I don't know the number off the top of my head.
It is, I'll tell you in a minute. It's 5513.
5513, and have a conversation in light of the legislation that was passed, and the intent of the legislation. Do we as a board want to revisit the piece of that policy related to the ability, not that it may ever happen, but the ability that a child may not be able to go to prom or
Okay.
to a trip. So I think that is where we landed. So yes, could we
Okay.
put that discussion in November?
So we'll
please?
put 5513 for first discussion in November.
Thank you, Mrs.
Okay,
Wellington.
no problem.
Okay, were there any other items under old business? Ms. Stern?
Just a super quick follow-up, and this might be too soon, Dr. Malash, but just wanted to check back with you that about the student representatives' comments regarding, and then our brief discussion about looking into the crossing over at East in the parking lot. It's only been a couple weeks, so I don't know if that's something that we can just circle back to next time, but I wasn't sure if there was any more updates on that or.
So we during the board meeting 2 weeks ago, there was a discussion. The student board rep from East talked about crossing the parking lot and the desire for a crosswalk to be painted in the parking lot. We've had an initial evaluation with engineers. It's not so easy as just painting lines, on the lot. There's other structural work that would have to be done within the parking lot in order to do that. Mrs. Sugars, Mr. Saporito, and Dr. Morton have been working with Dr. Perry and the team at High School East. They put an order in for orange cone type, they're not really cones, they're larger than cones, but stands to be used. And they're discussing what that supervision plan looks like to use those stands in the parking lot for students to cross and for staff members to cross in the parking lot. Also messaging, my understanding is Dr. Perry continues and the staff, the administrative team and the staff at East, reminding people about patience, and that driving a vehicle in a parking lot is a privilege, and we do need to be patient, whether we're students, whether we're staff members, whether we're parents or family members. In a couple of minutes, leaving a couple of minutes earlier or arriving someplace a couple of minutes later is always a much better option than, causing an unsafe situation, where there's lots of other humans that are around. So I expect that we'll have soon an update about what they're doing, and we can get some images about what that looks like, within the parking lot. Lots of people being in that lot is not a new phenomenon, over at High School East, but just what it looks like, and where we've been certainly has been a transition this year.
I really appreciate the follow-up. Thanks so much for, taking all those steps. And as someone who finds myself there more often than I would like to be, I won't reference the video game my kids play that the parking lot reminds me of. I'll just say I really do appreciate all the effort that's been put into it and the thought and it sounds like we're moving in a great direction. So thank you.
Thank you. Were there any other items? Okay, that will then bring us to our second public comment. And second public comment is for any topic item. And again, as always, please state your full name, municipality. And I will start with the member in the audience.
Hi, good evening. Nick Gaudio, Cherry Hill resident. The first thing real quick, we have 3 minutes, okay. My friend's son, Brandon, has a big football game this Friday with Cherry Hill West. So I just wanted to say, let's go, Brandon. Let's go, Brandon. All right, on to business. The 14-day travel ban for going outside of the contiguous states. There are no remote options at all for those students. I think that ban is definitely irrational. You can go to New York City, but you can't visit grandma 1 hour away in Maryland. 20 family members from Florida can visit your house, but you can't go on a hike on the Appalachian Trail in Virginia. You can drive 7 hours to Niagara Falls, but you can't go to Waffle House in Elkton, Maryland. Families are punished for visiting each other, traveling, and experiencing cultural activities. This is unfair, and parents on both sides of the argument object to this. Even your friend Beth, Dr. Malash, objects to this. Second issue, also the Rosa, my daughter attends Rosa, 6th grade, and in her humanities class, all the students were forced to watch a video that was pushing the vaccine mandate for children. In the video, they actually have a former White House advisor stating that it's necessary to have a vaccine mandate to protect children. That's the only way children can be protected from COVID. This is definitely pushing an agenda on our children that is absolutely not supported by many, many parents in this township. Our districts are our schools are no home for hate against those who do not want a voluntary medical procedure. No home for hate, right? Let's make sure that we do not teach our children to hate those who have a different opinion on medical procedures. And again, one last time, let's go, Brandon. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gaudio. And next we have a community member on the line. Please state your full name and municipality. Ms. Jessica Fingerman.
Hello there, Jessica Fingerman, Cherry Hill. First, I want to commend the board and administration for coming out to speak to us at our latest PTA meeting. I was at the one at Bret Hart, and I thought it addressed a lot of the questions that a lot of people have asked over the last few years pertaining to the 2018 failed bond. So thank you for that. And also thank you for the upcoming visits that are going to be going on throughout the district. I think it's going to be eye-opening for members, for the public, and I hope that they continue. The second part of my comment addresses 9.1, acting as civil models of decorum. And it sets the tone that we all act as, civil models of decorum for ourselves and for our students. This part of the comment is specifically addressed to Mrs. Tong. Mrs. Tong's running mate, Mrs. Carolina Bavad, is an administrator of a social media group that regularly vilifies members of the district administration, fellow Board of Education members, and on occasion, members of the public comment. These comments are public and viewable on Twitter. I want to know how Mrs. Tong reconciles 9.1 with what her running mate advocates. Is this also your position? And should Mrs. Bavad join you here on the dais, how will you both work together to repair relationships and the trust to ensure that you're able to move forward professionally on behalf of our children? Thank you very much for taking my questions, and have a good night.
Thank you. Next, we'll move to a member of the audience.
Hello, Carolina Bevid, Cherry Hill, New Jersey. I'd like to appeal to the board to make decisions and write policies based on facts and data instead of just blindly following blanket recommendations. Quarantine guidelines and in the future mask policies should exist on a scale of probable risk based on current circumstances, including community transmission rate, which is transmission rate, which is currently below 1. And then ultimately, we need off ramps so we aren't stuck in an endless pandemic. As far as the bond messaging goes, I would recommend a message about value beyond better facilities, specifically how property value will be increased so that people, especially those without students in the district, can support a tax increase. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we have a member on the line. Please state your full name and municipality.
Hi, I'm Jeff Podowitz, Cherry Hill, New Jersey. I'm reading from an article entitled Cherry Hill School District Found to be in Violation of State SEPAG Requirements by Balb Herpin, November 5th, 2018. Local parents group which filed complaint vows vigilance on all district education matters. Excerpts. CHEPTA will remain active and will continue to be a parent-driven organization within Cherry Hill Public Schools. We will attend BOE meetings and provide comments on policies and practices the district is implementing. And we will be available to all families for advocacy and resources. CHEPTA is still part of Cherry Hill's own TTA, who has given us support throughout the process and recognizes us a special education parent advisory group. And CHEPTA will watch to make sure regulations and are followed and implemented in accordance with state and federal laws, added Nadio. Skipping. Nadio said in a September email, this is to the Cherry Hills exchange with his son, that's the Cherry Hills son, she feels the district has marginalized the parents and guardians of students with special needs. She said CHEPTA has been raising concerns over its lack of input in district decision-making for more than a year, and the district didn't make any changes. But after the complaint was filed, the district decided to eliminate the function of CHEPTA. This is the group that I wanted added as a resource, all right, and equal to whatever SEPAG you have there now. The board didn't even blink an eye, and I'm surprised at certain board members that they did not. But what you see here is retribution as far as I'm concerned, and as far as maybe at that time they felt. And is that what the school board and administration really is about? I'm wondering, because what happened here, I remember What happened here should have never, ever happened. And it continues, I think, or it did continue after that. Anyway, thank you for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Potowitz. Next member from the audience.
Hi, excuse me, Jen Nadio, president of CHSEPTA, that Dr. Potowitz was just talking about. And thank you, Dr. Potowitz, for making those comments on our behalf. Thank you so much. I didn't even know you were going to do that tonight, but thank you. CHSEPTA is here tonight. I'm Jen Nadio, Cherry Hill Township and president of CHSEPTA. We're actually here to thank the district for recognizing National Disability Month, the Minute with Malash, and also the incredible online presence is very, very, we're very thankful for it. And we have been working with Miss Mallory to have our families share their lives with their children, with the district, and that will be going on throughout the year. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Nadio. Next, we'll go to the line, Kristen Viglietta.
Hi there, Kristen Viglietta, Cherry Hill. Regarding the middle level redistricting, the community doesn't seem to be aware that there are solutions being discussed other than simply turning the middle schools into 3 neighborhood schools. This has been the message that the community has heard thus far. It's really exciting that the committee is pursuing all options and very creative options, but please be sensitive to the students who are this year's 5th and 6th graders, that they would be allowed to finish at their current middle school, whichever plan moves forward. These kids have been through a pandemic that has affected nearly 30% of their public education years to date. And please do not put them through yet another change, and have all the plans include them to be able to finish their middle school years at the school where they began these 3 crucial developmental years. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Viglietta. Okay, next we have someone in the audience.
Excuse me. Andy McIlvain, Cherry Hill. Couple of quick comments. Dr. Malash mentioning that the last bond was 23 years ago. I think as a participant in that process 23 years ago, that makes me feel very, very, very old. Comment about the process, and I think several people on the board mentioned the process of building a bond, the fact that the bond does not exist yet. And those of you that know me know that I have a talent for belaboring the obvious, so I'm going to take advantage of that talent. As you were talking, I think that what occurred to me was that there's kind of 2 stages to this process. The process of developing the bond and putting a bond out there, which ends in January. And then the process of promoting that bond, describing that bond, listening to people, getting input that takes place after January. And I think it's important to develop the message, as Mr. Vadia said, but it's also important to consider how to deliver that message, how to listen as a result of that message, and how to adjust your thinking if it needs to be in January, February, March, April, as you go into a September bond. And finally, as a senior citizen, if there's anything that I can do to help in the process of reaching out to the senior citizen population or the population in general, based on what I know about the process in the past, what I know about the process now, and help the district in any way I can, I'm perfectly happy. And so good luck. I think you're doing a great job with doing what you're doing with the schools. Not that you need my approval, you know what you're doing, but I think it's great. And I think it bodes well for the process going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McIlvain. Next, we'll go to Brandy White on the line.
Yes, hi, my name is Brandy White, Cherry Hill. I am a mother of 4 children under the age of 12. And I wanted to speak again Along similar lines to what Mr. Gaudio mentioned earlier, that from a scientific standpoint, there's absolutely no reason for us to still have these travel restrictions for our children. They specifically only target children under 12 because they are not able to be vaccinated. So it is almost a punishment for them that they are not allowed to travel. On top of the fact that many of these children haven't seen their grandparents or family members that live out of state, my children included. I am not from New Jersey and I do not have family local in over a year and a half because of these restrictions. Now, we followed them previously, but there needs to be an end to these restrictions. These children need to be allowed to travel and no quarantine necessary. Or if you are still going to be ridiculous and maintain these travel restrictions and quarantines, then the district needs to provide these children with virtual learning. How on earth can they miss a few days of school and then be expected to miss another 7 to 10 days of education because they went to visit grandma, who is fully vaccinated and no problem? I can't fathom my children being forced to do that. And it's going to breed lying. Nobody's going to tell where they were. The children aren't going to be. And then we get into conspiracy theories, teachers asking children where they were. None of this is appropriate. We really need to focus on having these kids in school, getting a solid education after everything they lost last year. So I would please ask that the board remove the travel restrictions and guidelines before the holiday season starts. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'll go to a member of the audience.
Yes. My name's Leslie Maida. I lived in Cherry Hill for 13 years. I just mainly want to state about the free lunches that unless you've been under a rock, I'm sure you heard lots of complaints about the lunches being horrible. My child's not a picky eater. Unless it's mushrooms, she won't touch it. She's been making her lunch every night for school the next day. Today, I sent her to school with a turkey hoagie and a cup of fruit. I told her to bring back the lunch from school. I want to see it. All she does is complain about how horrible it is. She gave me the sandwich. It looked like a chicken patty. I cut it in half. Unless you're blind, maybe, I don't know if you want to come up and look at it, but it's black inside. Black. This is black. These are giving my child this crap. This is uncalled for. Where's the free lunch? What happened to all the grant money? Where's it going? Who's in charge of this? And then she said, they didn't give me French fries, Mom. I said, why? She goes, oh, they were frozen. I said, well, what about your drink? You get a drink? Well, all I do is drink water, and they want to make me pay for the water. Okay, I send my child to school with a hydro flask. This ain't free lunch. This is garbage. A dog off the street, I wouldn't give this to. Black inside. But they got free lunch.
Excuse me, can you please address your comments to the board?
Black. Well, everybody needs to see it. This ain't food, this is slop. Garbage. And as for the Eureka math, that's garbage too. When you learn math, you learn from formulas. The teacher goes up on the chalkboard teaches you how to do it with formulas. You learn from formulas. My daughter came home crying, hysterical. Mom, I don't know what happened, but they're not teaching me math. I said, what are you talking about? They're not teaching you math. The teacher gave me a piece of paper, told me to go with the other students in the group and to figure it out themselves. This ain't math. Cherry Hill needs to get their stuff straightened out. This is pathetic.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to the line. Kim Gallagher.
Hi, Kimberly Gallagher. Cherry Hill. I just, I don't really have much to add, but I want to reiterate the comments that Mr. Gaudio and Brandy White commented earlier about the travel ban or the quarantine. I mean, I agree. I think it's ridiculous and arbitrary, and there's no logic behind it. You know, we can do things within these couple of states that are acceptable, and I use air quotes in that, you know, I don't understand why it's acceptable to do things in this state, but not in others. As the holidays come up, you know, the teachers conference in a couple weeks, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, Christmas or winter break, people have expectations of going away. And I don't know how you're going to handle that when, you know, more and more families just don't care anymore. This is ridiculous. The kids need to see family. Families need to get back to seeing each other, and you need to lift this ban. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to a member of the audience.
Howard Yaris, probably the most naive person in this room this evening. But I want to congratulate the board for the patience in listening to some of this stuff. I don't know if I could do it. I thought the gentleman who spoke had a son whose name was Brandon in the school. It turns out it's a mime for a Trump person. It's been nice to come to these meetings and not have Republican, Democrat, blue, red. We concentrate on the needs of the students, and I hope it stays that way. I want to thank the board members for recognizing that there are senior citizens in this community. In past bond issues, senior citizens in this community and other communities have voted down the bond because they were not involved. You need to involve the senior citizens from the get-go. It's an important constituency because you have to convince these people that the value of their homes is dependent upon the quality of education in the Cherry Hill school systems. If that quality goes down, or is affected by bad buildings, bad infrastructure, those homes will reduce in value, which for most senior citizens represent their entire life savings. But again, thank you for your patience. It is amazing if people can sit up there and go ahead and go home and not end up kicking the dog or the cat. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yaris. Next, we'll go to a caller on the line, Lauren Greenberg.
Hi, Lauren Greenberg, Cherry Hill. I want to also talk, like everybody else, about the travel quarantine policy that's in place. I'm completely in favor of keeping kids safe, but this policy makes absolutely no sense at all. And as Brandy stated, it unfairly affects those of us with elementary or sixth grade students. I can basically take my 3 kids under the age of 12 to a Penn State game with 100,000 people unmasked and return to school the next day. But I can't take them to Connecticut to see their thrice vaccinated grandparents who they haven't seen in close to 2 years. Please explain that logic to me because I don't understand it. And are the road forward teams actually, particularly elementary and middle school teams, are they discussing this policy before the upcoming holidays? Because as everyone says, this is going to be a problem. They are going to travel. People are going to lie. Is that really what you want? Because that's not keeping people safe. That's just teaching people to lie. So that doesn't seem like the right solution either. Just because this is in New Jersey Department of Education road forward as a recommendation does not mean that we have to adopt this. Several districts in our area do not have this policy. In fact, my sister who's in Mount Laurel could go see my parents and take her children who are the same age as my kids, but I can't because there's no remote learning being offered. I want to also comment that for a district that seems so concerned with COVID to have these ridiculous travel quarantines in place, They're not eating, half of these schools are not eating lunch outside. Why not? Wouldn't that reduce the spread of COVID? I think you guys really need to think about some of your policies and look at them again and review what makes sense and what doesn't, and what is the end goal here. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll go to the audience.
Dr. Panina Mintz, Cherry Hill resident. I want to address agenda item number 21, the school goal districts. I urge the board to vote no on that since it fails to address any academic goals for districts, which is really the main function of these schools. Second item, I have over 40 years experience in medical research, pharmaceutical research, and medical ethics. Masking children, or anyone else for that matter, has no scientific justification. Forcing children to submit to a new genetic therapy that has no medical justification, is not FDA approved, and has no safety data is a violation of the Nuremberg Code and medical and clinical ethics, and is considered a crime against humanity. I urge you to pass a resolution tonight to inform all parents on the risks of masks and COVID-related genetic therapies. Moreover, please cancel any types of mandates. This is a free society. Let every parent decide for himself about the risks associated with this virus. Thank you very much. And lastly, I'd like to address, if I still have time, the attempt to silence members of the community's freedom of speech by the National School Board Association and Attorney General Garland. Garland memo came shortly after a letter from the National School Boards Association to President Biden that said that some rhetorical clashes between school boards and parents may amount to domestic terrorism. I'm hereby requesting that this Board of Education will issue an immediate letter assuring each member of the community that the NSBA and Attorney General Garland letters do not represent you or our school district, and you will be protecting each and every community member's freedom of speech. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Mindy on the line.
Hi, Mindy Rosen, Cherry Hill. I would also like to agree with Dr. Podowitz and give my praise to Cherry Hill Chisepta and my respect to Jen Nadio, who is amazing. That being said, I find it unbelievable that you justify violating the ADA by not painting one accessible parking space at the new Beck lot, the newly painted Beck lot. Once again, you are digging your heels in for two blue lines. It makes no sense to me. However, I did file an OCR complaint, so now that is out of my hands. I also do not think public comment is a time for a person to call in and bash another school board member sitting right next to you. I don't think you really should allow comments like that. And I really find it really troublesome. So that's all I have to say. Thanks very much. Have a good night.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to the audience.
Alana Yaris, Cherry Hill. I just wanted to say that if you listen to someone speak long enough and they're saying a lie, the lie becomes truth. So anyone who gets up at this microphone and says the same thing over and over again, hoping people will change their minds, but it's not truthful, is unacceptable. I also wanted to question about the redistricting with the middle schools, especially. What are the modifications that need to happen at Rosa in order for it to qualify as a middle school? I have mentioned before, and I'll mention again, that there is no stage at Rosa. I believe a stage is required for a middle school. And I'm just wondering if the district is redistricting so that
students can utilize all 3 middle schools. I'm not sure if it was mentioned possibly getting rid of the IB designation of Rosa, how Rosa will qualify as a middle school with the state, so that it can be used and utilized as a middle school. And I think you're out of disinfectant wipes also. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Beth Becker on the line.
Hi, Beth Becker, Cherry Hill. First, I just want to encourage the Board of Ed and everybody listening to Google, quote, "Let's go Brandon." It's not, in fact, a cheer for a student athlete. It is, in fact, code for an expletive aimed at the President of the United States, which I think we can all agree has no place at a Board of Ed meeting. Listen, I don't love the travel policy. I do believe kids should definitely get remote learning if they must travel. But I think that people stating that this gives parents no choice but to teach their children to lie is just wrongheaded. We should be teaching our children to be ethical and follow a rule or change it. But it's not a big deal to me, as there's no way I'm putting my unvaccinated kid on an airplane. I don't know if you've heard, but there is a pandemic going on. Middle schools, I would ask for grandfathering students in as well, like an earlier commenter. I'd also heard at a previous Board of Ed meeting, somebody say that they'd be looking at the demographics across the middle schools instead of just making it, 0802 goes to Crucy, 08034 goes to Rosa, et cetera. And I would just like to lend my support to that idea and reiterate that we should be looking at that. Thank you for coordinating the meetings regarding the needs at each building in the district. I also suggest you reach out to the senior community through the township, as one of the Board of Ed members suggested, when the bond is put together. They really need to see the state of the buildings now. Those that had students in the schools previously may not realize how bad it is right now. And they really need to be shown the correlation between the district and their property values. I think there's probably some data that can be shown to them that will really hit that issue home. Also, lastly, I just want to say thank you for the goals you presented. As you all know, the research supports your actions. In fact, you're a national leader and inspiring the rest of the country. Keep it up. The majority of the community supports you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Becker. Next, we'll go to the audience.
Rick Short, 1002 Shelton Parkway. I have 3 things tonight. First up is the event, the 8 shots that occurred at Cherry Hill West. The general question will be this: are we going to improve the physical security at that area? Are we going to improve the physical security? It's a very simple question. Second thing has to do with the bond. And again, I commend Ms. Stern again for being in touch with the public while the district keeps the ad hoc committee out of it and everything else. And again, the bond is too much, and you guys are really selling something that's way too much in the middle of a downturn of an economy, and it looks to fail again, but you don't listen. And then let's move into the recent statements from the Biden administration and the FBI. Yes, this is intimidation. And it is amazing to me when people come up to this mic and say that they're not teaching critical race theory, when you can go to Dr. Greason's Twitter account the other day, and he says, "We seek writers and scholars to contribute new perspectives on the importance of critical race theory, cultural responsibility." You guys are living in La La Land. And then it gets worse, because when you look in the curriculum, you get to see Dr. King Day being directly challenged by a senator. You wonder why parents are so mad.
Sort of one of the worst sort of offenders here, slamming you by name.
Excuse me, just make your comment, please. Don't play video. Thank you.
I've been playing my video every time.
Present discrimination. The only remedy to present discrimination is future discrimination. That's right. That's what he said. Think about that for a moment. He's saying that he's opposed to equality.
Excuse me. This is for public comment, not a video. Thank you,
No,
sir.
it's not a video. It's a video. It's a comment from a senator about critical race theory.
and you're trying to close me down, sir.
I'm asking for
May I
your
ask you-
comments.
I've been using quotes for months now, and now I'm not allowed to use a quote from a senator? Thank you.
Next, we'll go to Michael Johnson on the line.
Good evening. I wish tonight to speak regarding the comments that have been made by members associated with a group known as No Left Turn in Education. This group continues to show up at these meetings in attempts to try and get the African American history course. I'm sorry, by the way, I'm from Cherry Hill, excuse me. African American history course that was put together in good faith and collaboration between the district, students, and teachers, and they are trying to get this rescinded from the curriculum. That is their goal. This course is the first step towards making the conversations of equality a reality, and I, for one, applaud the district for having the courage and taking this necessary first step. Public education has to continuously evolve with the times. This group and its leader of the local chapter is continuing to infect the Cherry Hill School District and its constituents with fear-mongering tactics, lies, and falsehoods. They continue to hammer a false narrative that Cherry Hill is indoctrinating students and using critical race theory as their crutch for that argument. Rather, they use fear tactics to drive a wedge between the stakeholders of the district. And even worse, the leader of this group doesn't even have any kind of education background or interest in Cherry Hill schools other than being a taxpayer. How do we know this? This person never even showed up to one meeting until the course started to become a public knowledge event. To the public, I implore all of you, please come out and speak against these people who will continue to spread fear, anger, and yes, even hate into the Cherry Hill schools. One of my great U.S. history teachers at Cherry Hill West taught me a quote that I have never forgotten. The quote is this: "We control events better when we control opinion." This was spoken by a gentleman known as the Butcher of Prague, Reinhard Heydrich. One of the very same officials very instrumental in implementing the final solution during World War II. And it's ironic to me that this group is supposedly trying to fight indoctrination while attempting to do the very same thing they rally against. Lastly, to the board, while I know the rules forbid you to speak during public comment, I implore all of you to stand up and denounce this group. While they would try to have everyone believe that hate has no home is a political statement, all of you should be standing behind it as a matter of principle for Cherry Hill schools. Please, I beg you, stop allowing these people to control the narrative. Dr. Malash has had to consistently remind the public that CRT is not being taught in Cherry Hill. It would be nice for once if the board had the courage to stand with him in public and not abstain from the courage to do what is right. There was a time period where the school board would never have stood by and allowed these falsehoods to continue. Please, end the ridiculous fear tactic narrative so that we can get focused on the issues that are truly important to Cherry Hill, such as the upcoming bond, fair funding, class sizes, etc. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to the audience.
Ann Einhorn, Cherry Hill. So I just want to go back to something earlier. I applaud what you're doing as far as presenting the bond, particularly to the schools. The public has a chance to see these schools as far as the middle and high school beginning tomorrow evening. I do believe that Mayor Shinungulo also put it on her Friday newsletter on the internet, so we have some movement as far as going through the town. Yes, though Andy is a senior citizen, I was a student when the last bond was done, but I'm also willing to help him get a hold of those people called senior citizens. On another item, I was listening to the discussion about the crosswalks at East. If I'm not mistaken, West also has a similar problem. So while we're talking about high schools, so we could look at the same situation at both schools at the same time. I believe they're both difficult situations. Well, the previous speaker said it all as far as I'm concerned. If you want to talk about intimidation, yes, we have been inundated with this organization who absolutely refuses to look at the curriculum or meet with anybody in administration, to my knowledge, to determine exactly what our students are learning. I have reviewed the outline. I am not offended, and you all were here, most of you, when I said what I had to say at the last meeting. But in the meantime, if we're going to continue to have to listen to Dr. Mintz tell us that we're doing critical race and all her theories and her intimidation, referencing the words Nuremberg, if we have any financial dealings or social contracts with her or the New Abilities healthcare system, I would like to have the Board of Education, if it's legally feasible, rescind those contracts immediately. I do not want her business to be in our school system, considering how strongly she feels that we are doing intimidation. I always have something else to say. Oh, and a final note, I could have cried when I saw that Dr. Kirk is retiring, okay? This is a man who has inspired more students and staff, and I've known him for over 25 years myself, going back to when he was a young teacher and then an administrator. Thank you for your rudeness. Thank you so much for talking while I'm speaking.
Excuse me.
Please start
I'm
your
sorry.
time.
Forgive me. In the meantime, I don't really care. All I can tell you is that, thank you. I know it's a tough job. Actually, it's worse than it's ever been to be a school board member. And though I may not agree with you at times, just thank you for being there.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Jill on the line.
Hi, thank you. Jill Gutman, Cherry Hill. There's just a couple things I wanted to address this evening. The first is the free lunch program. I want to thank you for putting that, having our district participate in that, excuse me. But I know my daughters mentioned, and my son, that when there's children that are still hungry and they want to have seconds, those children are turned away from having seconds. So then those children are still hungry. If they're not able to bring a lunch to school that day, or they don't have money to purchase for seconds. So I'm just concerned about that. There's also a charge for water. So if kids don't want to drink a sugary drink like apple juice or the milk, there's not cups available for if they didn't bring a water bottle to have water. So if something could be done about that. And then lastly, there's no fruit that's made available on certain days too, and we're a big fruit household. So of course we can bring our own, but maybe other children aren't able to, maybe their parents aren't able to bring that for them. So I'd like to see fruit made available to our kids. The next thing that I wanted to speak about is this travel policy and not going outside Delaware, Pennsylvania, New York. There's parts of Pennsylvania like Pittsburgh or upstate New York that are actually further away than Maryland, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire. I've driven up and down the coast several times. I've lived in a bunch of those states. You could just Google map it. So to really see that, that's, really the distance. So I really think this plan of this quarantine policy needs to be updated. I can understand if you want to consider, children that are maybe flying or going to an airport, but if they're masking up and they're going from one house to someone else's house, or other comments being made about, you don't know where kids are going. If they go to New York, they could be, or going to Pennsylvania, they could be in a more crowded area than going elsewhere. It doesn't make sense really. So I think that needs to be updated. I do support wearing masks in the classroom, so I'm happy to see that's taking place. I'm upset that there's still not a eating outside lunch policy at many schools. I know Woodcrest, they eat outside, but that's not happening at the middle school level. And it's not happening at some of the other schools. And then lastly, the quarantine policy. If a child's on a bus, I think a video always needs to be reviewed. My daughter, we drive her to school because there was an issue where they thought that she was sitting next to somebody, where she wasn't. The video was reviewed, but I think that needs to be part of the policy as that it's always done.
Thank you. Okay, next we'll go to the audience.
Sarah Jocelyn, Cherry Hill. Yesterday was Indigenous Peoples Day, and some people still celebrate Columbus Day. In our diverse society, I'm wondering what we taught our children. It's going to be the Day of the Girl Child this week also. Again, what are we teaching our children that talks about the diversity of our community? This year will be the 400th anniversary of the Thanksgiving feast, the feast that was held up in Massachusetts. And so I just remind you of our responsibility to teach about all of our citizens. I think also I want to ask the question, since Cherry Hill writes its own curriculum, at what time will we be able to review the new comprehensive health and physical education curriculum? In our discussion of ninth graders, they're all in a class now where we're talking about important issues, including civic engagement. And I think it's an opportunity to talk about how the students among themselves feel about policing in schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that brings us now to superintendent comments, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Malaj.
Thank you, Mrs. Neri. So I want to thank the board for great discussions tonight. You know, for the first time that we've gone through this process with the committee of the whole and then with the consent agenda. I appreciate the interaction and the comments and the thoughts. We'll continue, we're scheduled to continue to go through this process into November and into December, but we will share, continue to share the information. There's some good questions tonight and moving forward. There are a few things that I do want to address that came up in public comment. Again, I encourage everyone that participates in public comment, whether in person or online, to again, take a moment to read the statement that we include on the board agenda and that Mrs. Neri goes through about being models of decorum and what it means, because we do have students that participate and students who watch, and not just our student board reps who are frequently here with us in the evening, but students who do watch what goes on. And it is a reflection of what takes place in our community. And I'm hopeful and optimistic that folks will have that on their minds when they approach the microphones or when it's their turn to speak, if they are calling in. You know, the school board meetings are great places to make comments about what's going on in the school system, to try to co-opt the meeting, to make very broad and lightly veiled profane statements about national politics is just not the place at all to do things such as that. There were a lot of comments tonight about the quarantine that's related to travel. I have been in contact with a number of parents and family members have reached out to me and to some of my colleagues over the course of the last couple of weeks. As we have done throughout the course of the pandemic, we are reflective and deliberative about what we do. We take guidance from the state of New Jersey, from the New Jersey Department of Education, the New Jersey Department of Health, the Camden County Department of Health, Virtua physicians. They are our school doctors, and we certainly always get input and perspective that is shared with us by community members, some who are involved in the medical field and some who are not involved in the medical field. Our perspective on and our guidelines for any humans who are not vaccinated, those who are unvaccinated who travel, still is based on the guidelines that are provided to us by the state. You know, that's what we will continue to do until something changes. It is something that we inquired when we were on the call last week with the County Department of Health about whether or not those guidelines were changing. And at this time, they are not. I have encouraged family members, you know, to reach out to the governor's office, to reach out to our legislators, and to share that perspective, to share, you know, what it is that people feel and what it is that people are, what they're thinking. In terms of the board goals, there are no outside organizations other than ones that we are financially contracting with that are listed in any of the action statements with the goals. Cherry Hill School District places tremendous value on the work that's done in the Cherry Hill Special Ed PTA, CHSEPTA, as well as our zone PTA and the individual building PTAs. The zone PTA, that umbrella organization that oversees and works with the 19 presidents from the 19 PTAs, 18 of which are building based, and then CHSEPTA, which is a district-wide PTA, is incredibly valuable. The parent resource and the human resource that's provided by families, truly one of the greatest resources that we have here in town. Not listing CHSEPTA within the goals because it is an outside organization, which is not within the locus of control of the school district, is not meant as a slight against CHSEPTA, nor is it meant as a slight against any of the PTAs in the district or any of the booster groups or any of the families that participate and are so intimately involved in everything that we do. The CPAG, the Special Ed Parent Advisory Group, is listed because it is an outshoot of what goes on within the school district. I'm incredibly appreciative of CHSEPTA, the voice that they have in the school district. I know that Ms. Mallory is our Director of Special Education, the team of supervisors and services, as well as many of our building principals and staff members throughout the district are involved with CHSEPTA, and there are ongoing meetings and discussions. That was shared by a couple of folks that I guess that perspective is there. That absolutely is not it at all. There were comments about lunch and about the meals. We do participate in the federal program for free and reduced meals that has allowed us this year to offer meals to every child who is in school in the district on a daily basis. We have gone through transition about what meals are being served to the students, what that looks like, how it is on the website and the information that's on the website. If there is ever a question or a concern about a meal, we encourage students and families. We encourage students always to address it immediately within the school. If there's a discomfort in doing that, we always encourage family members to please reach out to the building principal, reach out to one of us. Certainly the Aramark as our partners in providing the food service, they're interested in providing first quality meals that are here for the children. We want everybody who wants to receive a meal to have that opportunity to receive a meal. There are specific guidelines that must be followed in order for the meals to qualify for a reimbursable meal that meet the federal health standards that are provided. That's not necessarily the same thing that may be provided at home for a meal. I do know that bottles of water are what are considered an a la carte item. They are not included in the meal that's there. We can certainly find out about cups and about children having access. We've encouraged children, especially during the course of the last couple of years, to bring bottles of water or reusable bottles to school with them. We've continued to increase the number of bottle filling stations that are within our schools, and we encourage children to use those during the course of the day as well. We are not teaching CRT, critical race theory, in our schools. I can say that at every board meeting, that continues to be the truth. That continues to be the honest statement. I was excited last week, Channel 6 ABC came over and spent some time in one of our classes at High School East, had the opportunity to speak with the teacher and a couple of the students about the experience and what's going on in African American studies. It is a model program. There's a lot of discussion and work that goes on. It is curriculum that was written by our staff members. It was developed here. We're incredibly proud of what it represents and what it is. The incident took place in the neighborhood near the stadium behind High School West on October the 1st. Just to correct the statement that was made at the microphone about the 8 shots at Cherry Hill West, there were no shots at Cherry Hill West or on Cherry Hill West property. Shots occurred in the neighborhood near the stadium, not at Cherry Hill West and not at Cherry Hill West property. The investigation continues. It's ongoing with the Camden County Prosecutor's Office and Cherry Hill Police Department. We continue to work with them. There's really not a whole lot else to be updated at that point. There has been a review of what we do security-wise at all of our events, including events that take place at the stadium. Some of that will be visible for folks who attend the games that are there. Some of that will not be visible to folks who attend the games. There are a lot of discussions and a lot of comments about the bond and about referendum. The bond, as so many of us have said, has not been constructed. We've gone through, again, a very deliberative process, a very open process, and one that has involved a lot of information being shared at Board of Education meetings during the course of the last 3 years, since the December 2018 bond did not pass. We will continue to be open and very deliberative and very front-facing in terms of the information that is shared. We will look to engage as many people in the community as we possibly can. There were a couple of speakers that talked tonight about engaging the senior community. We will continue to work through the senior groups that are in town to do that, to be able to get and to hear perspective. Because again, the schools are the center of what goes on in our community. Cherry Hill enjoyed an incredible spike in the desire for people to live here during the course of the last 2 years. We believe that a huge piece of that is because of the quality of the education that's provided for the children. The quality school district that we have, that many of us and many of the folks that called in tonight had the opportunity to experience as students, which is why we have chosen to raise our children here, needs to be able to continue. The incredible work that our staff members do in the schools, in the classrooms on a daily basis needs to be matched and supported by the quality of the facilities in which they are asked to work on a daily basis. It is time. And again, I appreciate all the comments from the board members and the comments from the community members, both online and in person tonight, who are engaged and interested and want to be involved as we continue to move forward. I think that is it, Mrs. Neri.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Malash. We don't have any items this evening for our second executive session. So that will bring us to the end of our meeting this evening. And I'd like to make a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second? Ms. Arroyo, all in favor? Thanks. Have a good night.